This kid was a nobody at school, but one day he took down the strongest girl in school. Celia was beautiful, popular, and possessed more strength, more power. She farmed more aura than anyone. But Ian dropped her with a single cold stare. Everyone froze in shock. Celia hit her knees afraid. Who the hell is this guy? Since when did he get this strong? That was the question on everyone's mind. The truth nobody knew was this. 1 week earlier, when Ian was still nothing, a complete zero, he lost consciousness and blacked out for 7 straight days. In that time, he stopped being the weakest and became the most brutal fighter in the school. Even against high-level monsters, his eyes stayed cold, merciless. When he finally woke up a week later, he remembered nothing. With a headache, the protagonist figures the experience happened because of how much he drank the night before. On the desk in front of his bed, there were papers he doesn't remember leaving there. Ian notices the date on the calendar is different, as if the day is wrong, and wonders what that mail is doing there. He goes to the desk and picks up the sealed envelope, noticing the seal is unfamiliar to him. As he opens it, he finds several incomprehensible letters. He wonders if the person who left the paper was the same one who changed the calendar, noting that the handwriting looks feminine. Ian wonders if someone at the academy has feelings for him, remembering some girls from school. Determined to read the letter, even at the risk of being late for class, he finds a text about a childhood story and names written in a book. Sitting down, he looks at the beautiful handwriting and spots words like bride, hunting festival, demonic beasts, and classes, hoping it's a love confession despite the confusion. The text ended by saying that the sender, Sophia, would dream of him, dated in the year 571 of the imperial calendar. After finishing the reading, Ian thinks he was tricked, since the date doesn't match the calendar, meaning it's a lazy prank. The message also had a vague warning about the world ending if they didn't protect the future. The boy crumbles the paper, remembers he has to hurry to class, and throws the letter in the trash, wondering who would ever write a love letter to him. On a beautiful day in the academy courtyard, the protagonist walks to class and hears people whispering, calling him crazy. Ian sees the fear in others and notices an unfamiliar axe hanging from his waist, wondering what is going on. When he runs into Leto and Celine, he calls out to them, but the two pretend not to see him and talk about the sky to ignore him. Celine agrees with Leto, saying she doesn't want to get dragged into some weird place again. Ian gets his friend's attention, making Leto study him from various angles and notice a change in him since yesterday. Then, Leto hugs him and shouts that his friend has been freed from an evil spirit. Trying to break free, Ian asks what Leto is talking about and receives the explanation that something had possessed him for the past week. The protagonist says his last memory was saying goodbye to them the night before, making Celine ask if he really doesn't remember anything. Leto reveals that Ian was treating them like servants, ruining the group's reputation, and they only didn't bring in exorcists because he threatened them with the axe. Ian asks his friends if they are talking about this axe. Celine tells him to hide the weapon because it brings back bad memories, which also scares Leto. Confused, Ian wonders if he really was possessed, since he doesn't remember touching anything cursed, and wonders if his nightmare has something to do with it. Leto and Celine say they are relieved the entity left before things got worse. Ian then asks what else happened, and the girl reveals that he defeated the top second-year student. He quickly remembers she is Celia Yordina, the youngest aura expert and a known monster in the school. Finding it hard to believe, the protagonist asks if he really beat her up. Celine warns that he put her in the hospital for a week, making Ian try to imagine what kind of evil spirit could pull off such a feat. Then, his friend explains that he is scheduled to face the same opponent today, something the boy didn't know since he has no memory of the past week. In their previous fight, the young woman was down on the ground, struggling to reach her sword after losing. Before that day, Ian couldn't last 10 seconds in a duel against her. On that occasion, Ian's possessed body criticized the mediocrity of Celia's swordsmanship and punched her hard in the face. The girl was thrown out of the ring, but he didn't stop, landing another hit on her back at high speed. While the spectators watched in shock as the undefeated student was crushed, the fake Ian walked over and said she didn't even realize that all the openings he gave were a trap. Back in the present, Ian wonders why he has to fight her of all people, wishing he could face someone he could actually beat. Quietly, Celine advises Ian to forfeit while he still can, but his friends comment that the girl won't let this go, since the previous incident crushed her pride. A man with scars on his arm calls for everyone's attention and announces the start of the match, warning that it will be graded. Ian blames the evil spirit for disappearing before fixing its own mess. Knowing he can't afford to lose points, he decides to endure the fight for 10 minutes without winning. But before he can even react, Celia is already in front of him with her sword raised. Ian thought he could last 10 minutes, but he is blown right out of the arena in the very first second. While falling, he realizes his plan is ruined, and he will end up spending a week in the hospital. With no other choice, the boy knows he has to endure without giving up, because she won't let him leave the fight. Then, he gets back up and says it is his turn. Celia tells her opponent to do whatever he wants, so he preps his strike and charges without hesitation. The boy feels his body is much lighter and leaps high into the air. As he swings his sword, he notices his movements follow his will perfectly and wonders what happened during that missing week. The girl seems to enjoy the challenge and readies her defense. Before getting hit, she dodges, disarms Ian, and strikes him in the stomach. Down on his knees, he realizes that thinking he could escape this was just an illusion. Standing nearby, the young woman asks if he left an opening on purpose to lure her into another trap, remembering how she was humiliatingly defeated last week. Ian replies that she only talks about that day and threatens to go crazy if she brings it up again. Celia asks whose fault he thinks it is that she became the laughingstock of the school. Then she leaps forward, drawing her sword from her back and unleashing her full aura. Trying to defend himself, the boy confirms that his vision and reaction speed have improved. He believes he can match his opponent, but she spins in the air and bypasses his defense. The blow hits Ian head-on and sends him flying several meters back, proving he is nowhere near her level of strength. He gets up quickly, but Celia charges with everything to keep him from raising his guard. The young man tries to guess if the attack is coming from the side or from below, but he guesses wrong both times and gets hit again. He assumes the next strike will come from the front, which seems correct since she is already right before him, but it is a relentless, non-stop offensive. Despite the pain, Ian understands he has to endure the entire fight to satisfy her. He grips his sword handle firmly and wonders why she uses so many unnecessary movements. Celia repeats her warning not to charge when seeing an opening and assume it is a trap, which catches the young man's attention. She explains those were his exact words during their first duel, which is why she demanded a rematch. Even so, the girl notices that Ian's performance is terrible, completely different from the person from last week. Charging forward, she shouts and asks if it isn't time for him to fight seriously. Ian finally realizes that just as his own strength has increased, she has also changed. Thanks to the words spoken in their previous duel, Celia is making even more unnecessary movements. The battle gets tougher, but Ian manages to block his opponent's moves much better, making her even angrier. She pulls her sword back to try and shatter his defense. The boy realizes he has been matching her pace for a while now and thinks about giving up to get out of this situation. However, Celia pulls her weapon back once more and shouts that he is finally fighting seriously, claiming she will show him what she is truly capable of as she leaps forward. Ian calmly watches Celia's guard. Then, the sound of something breaking echoes. If Ian doesn't get up in 5 seconds, the victory goes to the girl. As the teacher starts the countdown, Ian's mind wanders, concluding that the possession and the duel with the best second-year student were the most unbelievable things in his life. Lying on the ground, he thinks he did everything he could to fix those crazy events and finally return to being normal. The countdown reaches 2, and Celia asks if her opponent took the hit on purpose. At 3, the girl warns him that things won't end this way, and that she will demand another duel if he gives up. She claims she will keep challenging Ian, even if he refuses or skips classes, until he is as humiliated as she was. The boy stands up furious, reflecting that he has to deal with a situation he doesn't remember creating, being treated as an arch-enemy over something from a week ago. The teacher asks if Ian wants to forfeit, but he wants to keep fighting. The instructor announces that the match will continue and tells them to get ready. Celia takes her stance and comments that this is good, since she didn't want to end the fight yet. Ian concludes there is no way to run from this situation anymore, and decides he will tear his opponent's pride to pieces. Celia charges with everything using the same tactic as before, but this time the boy waits for her to get close. At the moment of the attack, Ian's hand is already in front of his opponent. He catches Celia's sword with one hand, which shouldn't be easy. The boy steps in and pushes her weapon out of the way from above, saying he caught her. Panting, Ian recalls the words he thought when he stood up to fight again. Even though he is tired, his mind is sharper as he watches Celia's movements while they wait at opposite sides of the arena. He is sure he can dodge her now. He just needs to stay focused. Waiting for the first move, he considers baiting her to destroy her pride once and for all. The girl jumps and goes for the attack. With clearer vision, Ian sees her entire swordplay movement and anticipates where the strike will land. He catches Celia's sword as she swings it down with all her strength and throws the weapon aside, disarming his opponent. Right after, Ian pulls his own sword from his back and warns her that it's over. Knowing she lost, Celia covers her head with her arms and prepares herself for another week in the hospital. Ian gets worried, since Celia looks like a helpless little girl. He decides against a final blow and wonders if he should even finish her off. He questions why he's still dealing with something from last week, since this wouldn't solve anything and might just happen again. For Ian, winning isn't the important part, but understanding the situation correctly is, so he raises his hand toward his opponent. With a poke to Celia's forehead, he ends the duel, leaving everyone around shocked by the outcome. Celia asks what he's doing and if he's going to mock her for winning. Ian asks why she wants to beat him so badly, and the girl screams back that winning is everything and losing means becoming a laughingstock. Smiling, Ian asks if other people's opinions are really that important, adding that losing a single duel wouldn't stop her from being a genius overnight. Celia stutters in agreement, but insists she still wanted to win. To which Ian replies that being laughed at hurts, but asks if losing the purpose of everything she's done until now wouldn't be even more unfair. Celia nods, and Ian says he's always losing, pointing out that even if people laugh at her, she'd still be the best student of their generation. The girl calms down, says she learned a lot, and bows to thank him for everything. While Celine can't believe the result, the teacher excitedly announces Ian's victory to the crowd, who are curious about the student's strength. Watching the boy leave, Celia decides she'll follow the lesson left by her senior, without caring about what others think. Ian reflects that things never go as expected, since everyone starts to recognize him now. The students call him a demon who almost destroyed Celia twice, and they're terrified of him. Ian knows he only won because his opponent didn't use her full strength, but he thinks it's pointless to explain that. It's true that his aura and mana detection improved drastically, but still, in any other situation, he would have lost easily. Just then, Celine approaches with Leto and asks if he wants to recall what happened last week. Frustrated, Ian says yes, because he still doesn't know why he was possessed. Celine replies that the holy woman from the cathedral guaranteed he's fine, and, laughing at Ian's worry about his own reputation, says he's famous now and shouldn't care. This sudden fame annoys her, since the other girls at the academy think he's handsome, but when Ian tries to play it down, Celine changes the subject, saying no one underestimates them anymore out of fear of getting crushed. She asks if the rumor is true, and Ian asks which rumor she's talking about. Leto mentions that Celia is now following Ian everywhere and asks if that's true. In response, Ian tells them to look to the side. The three of them turn and see the girl hiding behind a tree, watching from afar with a useless mask that only covers part of her face. Celine asks why she's stalking him and threatens to beat Celia up again. To avoid a fight, Ian and Leto step between the two girls. Leto asks when this started, and Ian says it's been about 5 days and the situation is annoying him. Then, Leto holds Celine back and tells Ian to go solve the issue with the girl. As Ian approaches, Celia wonders what she should do to ask him something. He calls out to her and asks what she wants to say, since he noticed her stalking him all the time. She asks how he managed to see through her disguise. This makes Ian wonder if the girl really believes she was hidden like that. Celia says she's there to ask for guidance because she wants to get stronger. Ian notices she's much more polite than last time. He doesn't want to get directly involved with her and prefers a normal life, so he rejects the request. Ian wonders what he'd even have to teach her, since he's weaker than she is. Celia asks why he is refusing, arguing that he beat her in 2 duels. Ian explains that he didn't win because he's strong, but because she let her guard down. He turns to leave and adds that he won by pure luck. The girl protests, claiming that luck is also a skill, and begs him to teach her at least until the hunting festival. The mention of the festival makes Ian remember a letter about future incidents. The text reported that Emma, from the alchemy department, was attacked by a mysterious monster while looking for herbs in the forest. The memory leaves him lost in thought, and Celia agrees that he has no reason to help her. Ian states that because of her, he remembered something important and leaves, recommending that she look for Professor Derek if she wants to get stronger. Leto sees Ian walking away and asks if he resolved the situation, but his friend runs off without explaining. Ian doesn't fully believe the content of the letter, but the names of his friends bother him and he decides to investigate. When he arrives at the alchemy department, he finds a red-haired girl messing with potions. Ian goes to meet her, because he knows she has information. Later, Celia trains her swordsmanship, executing several movements. Professor Derek watches her and praises her performance, stating that she will be able to create a powerful aura before the hunting festival if she stays diligent. She thanks him, and Derek comments that he never imagined she would look to him for help. Celia explains that the training was Ian's advice, leaving the professor confused. Facing Derek's reaction, she decides to leave and states that he has nothing left to teach her. The professor thinks Celia has no social skills and is too direct. As the student leaves, Derek calls her back to say there is no rush, reminding her that a former student only got 2nd place in the hunting festival during his 2nd year. The girl tries to protest, but the instructor decides to give her a tip for her first event, explaining that she needs to get familiar with the terrain and the monsters of the southern forest. Celia asks if the creatures there are strong, and Derek clarifies that they are only dangerous in the deepest part, telling her not to investigate the area alone due to the rising number of beasts in the region. At another time, the red-haired girl, Emma, tells Ian a story about creation, where the celestial god Ars was born with light and the evil god Omlos emerged with darkness. She explains that the celestial god created the law of the flow of time and placed restrictions to preserve it, warning that only a being called Delphilm would have the power to challenge this order. After that, Ian admits he didn't understand any of the explanation. Emma mentions that he woke her up and forced her door open after a month of not seeing each other just to hear the story, adding that he needs some common sense. Ian asks for some slack, saying they are friends, but Emma disagrees, saying he only shows up when he needs something. The boy asks her to explain the matter better, and she decides to simplify, clarifying that going against the laws of time requires the strength of the servant Delphilm. Ian asks if the letters he received were sent by this entity, and the girl argues that it's impossible for a mythological creature of uncertain existence to do such a thing. The boy suggests the action of the evil god, but his friend dismisses the idea, tells him to leave, and he concludes that letters from the future really are crazy. Before Ian leaves, Emma hands him a presence-concealing potion to test. The boy asks if he will turn invisible after drinking the liquid, but she explains that the vial will only wipe away his presence. Ian opens the potion and drinks it immediately, complaining about the taste right after. Emma criticizes his attitude for using something so valuable right there, so he replies that his goal is just to test the product and asks her to close her eyes while he tries to hide. Emma closes her eyes and says that the more tests, the better. She tries to feel Ian's presence, and at that moment, a strange smoke rises from the boy's feet. He feels his presence completely disappear. If he stays quiet after hiding, he will have an advantage during the hunting festival. Ian plays around in front of the girl with her eyes closed, but the next second she grabs his clothes. The boy screams and asks how Emma found out what he was doing. She slams him to the ground and says she didn't even have to think to find him. The young man asks what that means, and Emma replies it's because of his smell. She explains that even without a noticeable presence, Ian's body is still there, and she can sense it, since everyone has a unique scent that only others can notice. Ian says he understands and wishes his friend luck with the item. Then, he asks why he's worrying about someone so strong. The boy says he'll test the other tube in the forest and bring back the result. Before leaving the room, Ian warns Emma not to go to the forest alone during the festival because the monsters are acting strange, asking her to call him if she needs to. She accepts the offer, and the young man agrees to help since he's free, leaving the place. The sun sets and the daylight fades. At that moment, Ian has a new letter from the future in his hands. He crumbles the paper and throws it in the trash with the other messages. Then, he wonders who's sending those to him. Ian lies in bed, trusting that Emma will be fine because of his warning about the forest. Leto shows up and shouts, asking where his friend went earlier without explaining anything to him or Celine. The newcomer claims he had to calm the girl down, but Ian interrupts him and steps closer, shouting that Leto's letters made Emma make fun of him. Leto doesn't understand the accusation, and the protagonist says he'll let it slide, but asks him not to overdo the joke. The other boy asks about Emma, and Ian replies that she's fine. However, the girl's real situation is completely different. The fourth part of the letter from the future reads like a girlfriend complaining about not getting an immediate reply. The next day, at the Academy Cathedral, someone uses light magic on Emma, who's unconscious in bed. The Academy Saint uses a greeting from the Holy Kingdom, while Leto and Ian remain in prayer. The woman explains that the girl was found in the forest after a monster attack. The event is considered strange because these creatures usually aren't in the area, and Emma only escaped because she used a potion to fake her death. Ian asks the saint to use her divine power, but she explains her ability isn't almighty. The woman clarifies that she could perform a miracle if she received a high-value object as an offering. The young man argues that an herbalist's daughter doesn't have anything of such high value. The saint specifies that it doesn't have to be monetary value. It just needs to be something hard to obtain to have the same effect. She advises them to prepare for the worst. Ian says Emma's father will arrive soon, and that it'll be hard to explain the situation to him, insisting they make the offering. Ian says he'll speak to the girl's father, since he was the last one to talk to Emma. The saint assures him the incident wasn't anyone's fault, and that he didn't need to carry that burden. Then, she casts a light spell to help the young man regain his peace of mind. Nearby, Leto shouts, questioning how such a dangerous monster appeared at the entrance of the forest because without that, Emma would have escaped unharmed. Ian watches him from afar, but before he can approach him, a loud cry fills the room. Emma's father arrives and despairs when he sees his daughter's condition. While the man cries and asks why this is happening, Ian stands there in shock. The young man approaches to confirm they are related, and the man asks if Ian knew her. Crying even harder, the father begs for help to see his daughter's face one more time. Ian explains there is nothing he can do to change the situation right now. Since he and Leto are just low-ranking nobles, he can only tell him that the priests are doing everything they can for her. Remembering the potion he received yesterday, Ian hands it to the man, explaining it was the girl's amazing achievement. The man refuses the potion, calling the young man young master and insisting he keeps the bottle as a keepsake. Grabbing Ian by the shoulders, the father makes a desperate plea. He kneels before the young man and begs him to never forget Emma. Ian starts to wonder if he really couldn't have changed the situation. He concludes the incident would have been avoided if he had taken the letter seriously and stopped the girl from going to the forest. Unsure if the letter came from the future or if its content was real, Ian feels he can no longer ignore those writings. The only way out he finds is to track down Sepia and find out the truth, making sure the described events can be prevented. Later, Leto hears the name Sepia and shouts, asking if Ian got a girlfriend or fell for a scam. Annoyed, Ian puts his hand over his friend's face to shut him up, emphasizing he has no romantic interest and just wants to find the author of the letter. Leto asks about the Academy records, but Ian replies he found nothing. His friend suggests the name might be fake and jokes again about the person's intentions. After getting punched in the face, Leto promises to stop joking and mentions that sepia is the name of a flower. Ian agrees and explains that since it is a very common plant in the northern lands belonging to the Yardina family, the name might just be a pseudonym. Leto offers to investigate the region. However, he warns that if the matter involves someone from the north, he can only think of one person. Looking to the side, Leto warns that their fan is nearby, while Celia watches them from afar. Ian thinks of her too, and Leto doesn't understand why the girl, being from the only northern family, would send letters with a fake name instead of speaking directly. Then, Celia approaches with a small bag as a thank you for his teachings. The bag contains a large amount of gold, but Ian refuses to accept it. Celia claims she was rude to ask for lessons without offering anything in return, but the young man disagrees and asks why she wants his classes so badly. The girl replies that no one besides him has anything to teach her. Ian notes she continues to be rude without realizing it, while Celia argues that one can learn a lot from the person who defeated them. Ian comments that the student will do just fine on her own and doesn't need him, but Celia interrupts, stating that if she misses this year's hunting festival, she will never get another chance. Ian remembers the letter mentioned Sepia's presence at the same festival. While she talks about increasing her strength, the young man puts his hand on Celia's shoulder and invites her to train together. He wants to find out if she is Sepia, and daily training could help. During their meetings, he discovers Celia has no social skills and can't interact properly with other people, earning the nickname of the rude Yardina without actually having any bad intentions. On top of that, the girl doesn't understand the concept of resting and uses healing potions to train non-stop. Ian approaches, holds Celia's injured leg, and explains that potions heal wounds but don't get rid of bodily fatigue. While bandaging her, he asks about her claim that the festival was her last chance. Celia explains that she needs to defeat a fourth-year student before her graduation. Ian suggests fighting the person some other time, but Celia replies that she'd be exiled if she faced the head of the family. Her opponent is Delphine Yardina, the strongest fourth-year student and her half-sister, who will take over the family after graduation, making the academy the only place where the branch family can challenge the main line. After receiving another letter, Celia appears bruised on the ground, thinking that changing the rules of a duel is unfair. Delphine calls her courage to face her without enough strength commendable, but claims the girl lacks the ability to gather people to her side. Celia thinks that everyone is on her sister's side, and she has no allies, wishing she had someone with her. In the present, in front of Ian, the boy finishes the bandage and tells her she can move now. Celia thinks it would be great to have him as an ally and plans to ask him. Emperor Adelis stands before all the academy students, who cheer at the start of the hunting festival. The grand event is a competition to hunt the strongest magical creature in the southern forest, where animals are only hunted during this season. Ian thinks about Celia and Sepia participating in the festival and wants to find out the truth about them. After that, Celine appears behind Ian and asks him to go together. Ian asks why she's in such a rush, and Celine asks if he's an idiot. Surprised, he asks why she says that, and she replies that normally nobody would want to train with the person who just beat them up. Ian says he already made peace with his opponent. Celine argues that the girl followed him for days after the duel, but the boy clarifies that she doesn't follow him anymore and just wanted to ask a question. Celine asks why Ian is taking the other girl's side. Suddenly, Ian grabs Celine by the cheeks and stares straight at her face. She asks what he's doing, and Ian leans in to ask if she changed her perfume. The girl replies that it might be her new face cream, while Ian notes that he managed to change the subject. Next, Celine asks what exercises they'll do today, and Ian replies it'll probably be forest exploration. Celine says she hopes they don't end up fighting a magical beast. The letter Ian received warned about an attack by magical creatures during the event. He reflects that he's the only one with this knowledge and wants to avoid all possible casualties, anticipating the tragedy to save lives. Once in class, the teacher calls for everyone's attention to remind them that a student was recently attacked near the entrance, which is a sign that they need to be careful. The teacher explains that the forest ahead has many trees, making it hard to use a sword without being aware of the surroundings. Looking to the side, Ian notices Celia's presence in the class and notes that the magical beasts know the terrain better, giving them the advantage. Professor Derek says the situation would be different if the students were experts in using aura, demonstrating a movement with his sword that shatters the surroundings, but points out that they can't completely ignore the environment. The teacher explains that certain situations would determine victory or defeat, making it crucial to keep their distance. Because of this, the exercise would take place in the forest, and he tells the students to form pairs to explore the area. Ian thinks about the letter and realizes that forming a group could make it easier to fight the mysterious beast, but he knows that gathering everyone in one place would look crazy to the others. So, Ian's only option is to inform the teacher about the group of magical beasts and team up with a specific person. Celine approaches wanting to partner up with Ian, but he doesn't show any interest in going with her. Instead, Ian grabs Celia's shoulder and invites her to team up with him. Celine realizes she was quickly replaced by Celia. Soon after, Ian and Celia are already walking through the forest, but they still don't find any magical beasts along the way. Ian finds the situation strange, and Celia agrees, since she hasn't felt the presence of any monsters nearby. He trusts her ability to detect the creatures, but doubt still consumes him. He suggests they rest for a bit without lowering their guard, and she agrees. As the sun sets, the two wait for something to happen, until Celia musters up the courage to ask why he chose her for this exercise. Ian answers it was because they're friends, asking if he's the only one who thinks that way. Because of the favor he did by becoming her friend, Celia asks if she should offer him money in return. Ian explains that would just be a transaction, not a real friendship. He says that friends talk, walk together, and share personal things, so just spending this time together is enough. Celia asks for permission to ask a rude question, wanting to know if he's acting this way for his friend's sake. She wants to know if they came this deep into the forest because Emma was attacked, and if Ian is looking for revenge against the magic beast. Ian answers he isn't sure, but when she insists, he raises his voice, saying he already told her he doesn't know. He promises it isn't about revenge, but that he's here to look for the magic beasts. Celia asks if what he's doing is something friends should do for each other. Ian says it's just a natural reaction and asks what she would do in his place. She answers she would destroy the magic beast, and Ian agrees that is exactly how he feels. Celia then wonders if this is the true meaning of friendship. Ian warns her he won't blindly charge at a monster since he needs to make sure they aren't in danger first. Suddenly, something catches his attention, and he tells Celia to be quiet and focus to see if she feels it too. Soon after, she also senses something strange approaching them. Dozens of purple eyes glow in the dark parts of the forest, indicating that the students nearby are in grave danger. After another excerpt from the letter, the story moves forward. The two stand still, staring at the absurd number of monsters in front of them. Celia puts her hand on her sword and asks if they should attack right away. Ian disagrees, saying it's best to run and warn Derek instead of fighting all the creatures. He asks if she's ready to run, and as soon as Celia confirms, Ian shouts for them to start running. Together, they begin to bolt. Ian is soon out of breath, but they can't rest because the magic beasts are chasing them. The distance between them and the monsters is wide enough to guarantee their escape, and Ian thinks that if they keep the pace and warn Derek, they might avoid a tragedy. His thoughts are cut short by a high-pitched scream. Looking back, Ian sees Celia fallen on the ground, clutching her twisted foot in intense pain. She explains she sprained her ankle, which was already hurt from training, but says she'll be fine once she puts on a brace. Celia tells Ian to keep running and leave her behind. He turns to look at the monsters, not expecting this to happen. The beasts close the gap rapidly, and things will get dangerous if they don't start running again. Ian decides to tell Celia to go ahead of him. She asks what he's talking about and if he wants to stay and fight because of her. Stepping in front of her, Ian says she shouldn't say those things to her friends. Then, he charges toward the magic beast while Celia screams his name. Ian can no longer hear her in the silent forest and finds it strange that the local animals sensed the predator's presence and hid. Stopping his run, he thinks there's no need to face the beast head-on and prepares an ambush. Ian pulls out a potion vial to hide his presence and decides to test it. Slamming the vial onto the ground, Ian mutters that the taste is still just as horrible as the first time he drank it. As long as the effect lasts, he can deal with the monsters before being noticed. Remembering the detail about the smell, he dirties his own clothes to disguise himself better and climbs a nearby tree, getting out of the beast's line of sight. Under the orange sky, Ian waits quietly, wishing the monsters would hurry up so he can get this over with. A paw wrapped in black lightning-like energy appears. The magic beast arrives, showing off its gray fur, pitch-black eyes, massive fangs, and a body larger than an adult. It exudes an insane amount of magic energy. That is definitely a demonic beast. The monster heads in Ian's direction, but it seems confused since the scent it was tracking suddenly vanished. With a leap, Ian draws his sword and charges at the creature to launch his ambush. The monster looks to the side, seemingly finally spotting the boy. Ian strikes the monster's head with his sword, but his aura does not pierce the creature. He uses his own weight to force the blow, shouting for the target to go down until he finally manages to bring it down. The first enemy is defeated, but Ian wonders how many are left, knowing he cannot fail and put Celia in danger. He hides again, planning to finish them all off right there. From a distance, the boy sees other beasts approaching his hiding spot. He finds it strange that they are not in a pack, thinking their demonic nature might have changed their behavior. At least 5 camouflage targets are looking for him, and Ian knows he needs to eliminate them all before they call the rest of the pack. Quickly, he begins to attack silently, his strikes growing stronger as he takes the creatures down. One of the wolves manages to bite the arm Ian uses to hold his sword. To avoid screaming and drawing attention, he uses his other hand to swing his hatchet, bringing the weapon down on the monster's head with all his strength, causing massive damage. Several enemies fall dead, and the smell of blood is bound to attract the rest. Ian concludes his hatchet is incredibly useful and notices his senses and reaction time are much sharper. He realizes the possession made him much better, feeling like he can defeat any number of monsters ahead. Elsewhere, Celine steps on a sword lying on the ground, annoyed that Ian paired up with Celia. While she thinks the two are on a date, Celia appears right behind her, calling out for Professor Derek. The man walks over to his student, who is still limping, and asks what happened. Out of breath, the girl reports the presence of the magic beasts in the forest and explains that Ian stayed behind to protect her. Derek understands the situation, tells her to wait there, and runs into the trees, promising out loud that he will save the boy. Tired and hurt, Celia falls to the ground, only wishing for Ian to return safely. At that moment, a portion of the love letter to the protagonist is revealed, detailing when they became closer. Back in the forest, several wolves are already dead, but more keep appearing. One of the monsters approaches the corpses, falling into Ian's trap. Taking advantage of the distraction, the boy leaps out from among the bodies and strikes the beast in the neck with his sword. Another beast is down, but Ian is already exhausted. Then, a howl echoes nearby, and the boy complains about having even more monsters to face. 2 wolves appear together and prepare to attack. Ian's sword is still stuck in his last enemy when the duo charges at him, giving him no time to rest. Raising his hatchet, Ian prepares to keep fighting and dares the wolves to come get killed. The beasts are more dangerous than normal wolves because they are magical, but their movements are simple. The boy thought it would be much harder to handle more than one enemy at a time, but he realizes he can win if he keeps up this pace. Then, he channels lightning power through his blades to slash through the monsters, dealing massive damage with strikes that hit them right after he passes to the other side. Ian was wiping out everything in his path with incredible strength, but his legs begin to shake. Exhaustion makes him lower his axe until he notices yet another enemy watching him patiently. Annoyed, Ian says that is a smart strategy for a monster and leans against a tree, having no reason to attack first. He wonders if the wolf set a trap, waiting for him to fall into it. An unexpected scent catches Ian's attention. Believing it is the smell of Emma's blood, he charges at the beast, fueled by rage. The next second, the boy realizes the smell is not blood, but rather the potion from the girl's lab. Realizing this wolf was the one that hurt Emma, Ian grips his sword tightly, pointing it at the creature as he spots a piece of the girl's clothes caught in its teeth, and vows to kill it right there. The wolf seems to enjoy the situation, opening its mouth and tossing the fabric, which hangs on the blade of Ian's sword. The boy notices he's being mocked by the monster, which circles him seeking revenge for the slaughter of its kind. Knowing it's no ordinary magic beast, Ian concludes that one wrong move will be his end, and that he needs to test the beast's abilities first. However, in less than a second, the wolf lunges with its mouth open to devour him, but the boy manages to dodge at the last instant. Ian doesn't escape the attack unharmed and is slammed against a tree, taking near fatal damage. The monster moves fast and is soon in front of the boy, ready to destroy him. Reacting as fast as possible, Ian throws his sword imbued with red aura at the beast. The wolf tries to stop the blade with its teeth, but the plan fails and the weapon slices the animal's mouth completely, making it howl in pain. Taking advantage of the distraction, the boy charges and strikes his hatchet with a quick slash right between the creature's eyes. Despite the direct hit, Ian still needs brute force to cut through his opponent. The beast uses one of its paws to shake off the stuck axe, leaps backward, and repositions itself. Annoyed by the display, Ian says seriously that he should sell the wolf to the circus. Watching closely, the boy notices the animal's teeth are shattered because of the sword, stopping it from biting, but it still has other attack options. Tired, Ian thinks he won't be able to dodge if the creature uses that speed again, and then evades a stealthy claw swipe almost too late. At his limit and out of strength, he sees the beast purposely drag out the fight and accepts he has to take another approach because he has no choice. Suddenly, the wolf launches an attack that hits the boy dead on, throwing him against another tree. Ian falls to the ground motionless, and the animal approaches cautiously, using its paw to test if he moves. At that moment, a piece of a letter reveals that the incident with the magic beasts was the fault of Dean Delamore. Without facing another immediate attack, Ian opens his eyes, glares at the monster, and slowly tries to grab his axe. Remembering that the creature hurt Emma for fun, the boy gets on his knees while a pool of blood forms on the ground. Holding the sword pointing upward with both hands, he takes advantage of the monster lowering its guard and stabs its guts. Ian thinks the fight is about to end, but things wouldn't be that simple. The wolf starts to speak, amused as it says Ian gladly tried to rip its belly open. The creature claims the boy didn't realize he fell into a trap. Even so, Ian manages to finish his strike, ending the fight for good. Under the forest sun, the boy warns that the animal should learn to finish off its victims instead of playing with them, as the monster's arrogance was its ruin. Then, Ian raises his sword one last time, ordering the creature to remember who executed it. Using lightning magic and speaking Emma's name, he eliminates the monster for good, sealing his revenge. Elsewhere, as the day ends, Derek keeps searching for Ian, worried about his condition. Suddenly, an explosion catches the teacher's attention, and he decides to check if the boy is involved. Sensing the presence of two beings nearby, Derek theorizes they are Ian and the magic beast. At that moment, Celine catches up to the teacher and desperately asks about the boy. Derek warns that he isn't there and, when asked about Ian's whereabouts, looks toward the explosion without replying right away. Finally, he says they will find out eventually if they keep searching, and everyone starts walking. Further ahead, the group's attention is drawn to Ian, who is sitting and leaning against the body of a giant gray wolf. Celine runs toward the boy, who starts to laugh and says they are late. The girl cries, while the others are shocked that he's still alive. Ian tries to call Derek's name, but his vision begins to fade and he passes out. Later, Ian wakes up in a hospital wing bed. The saint tells him that Derek carried him here after the battle. She says it'll take some time before he gets discharged, though he was lucky to only suffer minor injuries. His gamble worked, and he managed to avenge Emma, even if it doesn't wake her from her coma. According to the professor, the beast was young, which allowed Ian to win. Then, Leto shows up annoyed. He claims Ian risked his life just to look cool in front of a girl. Ian pretends not to understand, and Leto asks if he had Emma's potion during the fight. Ian confirms that because of the potion, he was able to eliminate the beasts. Leto points out that he could have given the potion to Celia, allowing them both to escape without any trouble. Also, Leto mentions that Celia was worried, hanging around the temple every day hoping to see him. This news doesn't make Ian very happy, since the girl preferred to visit the place multiple times a day, instead of just coming in and talking to him directly. Someone shouts Ian's name and runs toward his bed. With a jump, Celine hugs him, happy to see that he's finally awake. She doesn't greet Leto, keeping her attention only on her friend, and bites Ian's hand, asking what they were talking about. Leto changes the subject and says Ian failed to get a reward of 70 gold pieces for defeating the monster. This gets Celine excited, while Ian, in pain, claims he didn't know about the money. Next, Celine interlaces her fingers with Ian's. Squeezing his hand, she asks where they're going to eat. Ian cries out in pain, complaining that she hurt him, but Celine ignores it and invites him to a dragon meat restaurant. Frustrated by his complaining, she calms down when Ian assures her he's not angry. Hugging him in tears, Celine says she thought he wouldn't survive, which makes him feel calmer. Ian replies that he won't be defeated easily and pats her head, thinking she smells nice. Annoyed, Celine asks why he always puts himself in danger for Celia, saying she hates it. He explains that he can't let an acquaintance face a danger they can't handle. Celine shouts that's not the point, revealing that he's been the most important person in the world to her since they were kids, and nothing else matters. Ian gets confused by her words, thinking her worry is a bit dramatic. Snuggling up to him, Celine asks him to take care of himself, and Ian concludes she's still in shock from the situation. Celine places her hand over his and then on his head, making him sweat from nervousness. Moving in slowly, she tells him to stay still right before Leto walks in and catches them up close. With the noise Leto makes, Celine jumps off the bed, screaming in surprise. Leto apologizes for the interruption but says he's still there, which relieves Ian. Ian, who always saw Celine as a sister, is overwhelmed by the situation, and Celine yells angrily for him to forget what happened before she leaves. Pointing his finger at Ian, Leto warns him that if he plans to pursue Celia, he needs to be careful with Celine too, making Ian realize how complicated things are. Elsewhere, Celia walks by as people notice her, calling her rude and criticizing her for running away from the magical beasts. She tries to ignore them, but it hurts to be looked down on, and she starts to believe the gossip. Celia thinks Ian didn't need to fight and blames herself, remembering that he took her place and asked his friends to keep it a secret. Finally, she recalls the day Derek showed up with Ian on his back, shouting for an emergency operation at the temple. Celia feels guilty that Ian came so close to death and wonders why he risked his life to save her. Before, she couldn't answer that, but now she seems to understand. Just then, Ian appears, asks if she was meditating, and immediately invites her to eat. Celia realizes he is the only person she feels comfortable with, even when he acts rough or complains to her. She notices that Ian never responded to her harshness in kind, accepting her for who she really was, and realizes she never wants to lose him. She thinks she understands a bit of how he felt when facing the magic beasts. Just as she doesn't want to lose him, he didn't want to lose her either, because friends don't want each other to die. After that, entering the temple and going up to Ian's stretcher, Celia realizes he was the first friend she ever made. He greets her, and she asks if he is doing okay. Ian answers that he barely feels any pain now, which relieves her. He mentions he is happy she visited, as his head was hurting from studying a book Leto brought him. Ian asks if she had changed, and Celia, holding a bag, asks if he isn't angry with her. Ian thinks she is still worried about what happened in the forest, but says he has no reason to hold a grudge. Celia presses the question, and Ian repeats that he helped her because they are friends. He asks if she wanted to give him money for saving her. She quickly explains that Professor Derek asked her to deliver the reward in the bag as fast as possible because he defeated the magic beasts. When Ian opens the bag, he notices way too much money and asks if she added extra gold, which she tries to play off. He refuses the money, says her life is worth more than any reward, and hands the bag back, brushing her hands in the process. Celine interrupts the moment with a cheerful good morning, and the two pull apart. Celine gets annoyed seeing Celia there and shoves her, ignoring the girl's presence to ask how Ian is doing. Ian questions his friend's behavior. Celia says she is going to train and leaves, holding her arm which was hurt from the shove. Celine calls Celia rude and blames her for Ian's condition. He questions her attitude again, but Celine changes the subject, suggesting where they should eat after he gets discharged. While Celine plans the meal, Ian remembers Leto's words and thinks that the world of women is more complicated than he imagined. Ian tries to bring up the subject again and questions Celine's rudeness, but she suggests eating together after he leaves. Walking out of the hospital, Celia is noticed by nearby students because of her sad look. One student comments that she looks meaner than usual, calling her a disgrace for being spoiled by the professor and abandoning a friend, and suggests crushing her. Another student looks for ways to exploit her and asks if she has any weaknesses. By the fountain, Teen warns the group that they shouldn't mess with Celia because of the Yurdina family. A person approaches, saying she has something interesting to share about the girl. Lupin questions the stranger's identity and tells her not to nose in, but Teen calms him down and asks what she knows about Celia Yurdina. A green-haired girl pulls back her hood, mentions something about Celia's birth, and promises they wouldn't have to worry about revenge from the Yurdinas. Inside the temple, Ian sits next to Emma's bed, feels sorry for her situation, and thinks he should have believed the letter to avoid this tragedy. He notes that the attack on Emma and the forest incident already happened, and the document suggests that possibly stronger monsters will appear at the festival. Ian realizes he will need the professor's help to face the threat. The Saintess calls Ian by name and asks if he was already discharged. He answers that he just stopped by before leaving and asks about Emma's condition. The Saintess explains that the girl is still alive but hasn't regained consciousness, and explains that the healing miracle requires an object with high divine power or magic energy. She points out that remains of valuable magic creatures would work, but they aren't available, and Emma's father wouldn't be able to get them. Ian clenches his fists in silence and asks if a high-ranking magic beast would be enough. The Saintess shakes her head as she continues her magic on Emma, but she clarifies that an adult magic beast could work. Ian thanks her and excuses himself. The woman says the patient will soon have a miracle, and they must both take care of her. On his way out, Ian wonders if the monster from the letter is strong enough for the cure. He realizes he needs Derek to face something of that level. The young man runs through the academy and bursts into the professor's office, apologizing for the intrusion. Without looking up from his paperwork, the professor asks what the problem is. Ian immediately asks if Derek can handle beasts stronger than the wolf from the southern forest. Answering with caution, the professor says that stronger beasts are unlikely to appear. Ian asks if the monsters didn't just appear out of nowhere before, meaning there are no safety guarantees. Derek firmly states that the chance of something bigger showing up in the forest is minimal, as these creatures appear in places with high, unrefined magic energy. He explains that the Empire manages inhabited areas to prevent this, and the festival serves to control the beast population, keeping the dangerous ones away. Ian nervously asks what would happen if a stronger beast survived. The professor argues that powerful monsters have a strong presence, so it's very rare for a creature with special abilities to go unnoticed. Derek adds that the event tests who hunts the strongest target. The goal is to improve the student's skills by overcoming crises without direct interference. Understanding that the professor will only act in extreme cases, the young man decides to face the problem alone. The academy tower clock strikes 1. In the cafeteria, Celia walks with a plate of food toward a table. Other students start teasing her and calling her rude. They had stopped the jokes for a while, but now they laugh at her again. She tries to stay calm. Teen then asks if she's the motherless Yurdina, catching her off guard and making her angry. The boys surround her and ask if she has something to say. Celia decides to ignore them, but Teen steps in, shoves her, and knocks her plate down, mocking the brilliant Yurdina. The plate shatters and Celia screams in pain as she falls. She decides not to fight back. Isn't she the strongest student? Why doesn't she just beat the crap out of these jerks? Outside the academy, the day looks beautiful. Ian walks with a smile, mentioning it's been a while since he ate anything other than hospital food. When he arrives, he hears other students talking about someone leaving the cafeteria full of anger. One of them mentions the Yurdinas, claiming the girl is the disgrace of the family because her mother is lower class. The students comment that if anyone were to defend her, it would only be the senior who hangs out with her. One of the boys can't remember the name, but someone answers it's Ian Purkis. Turning around to see who spoke, the student stares right at Ian, terrified as he feels the young man's overwhelming presence right next to him. Ian asks if there's something wrong, but the student tries to change the subject by talking about the weather. The boy then notices his friends have already run away. Before he can escape, Ian grabs his shoulder and asks for a moment to talk, saying he has a lot of questions. Closing a door, Ian asks why swordsmanship students need to take topology, a subject that makes him sick. Leto walks over and asks the protagonist to look at a paper, which turns out to be a newspaper article about him. The piece claims Ian became the talk of the academy after defeating over 10 magic beasts from the southern forest by himself, including a high-ranking one. The text also mentions that Celia Yurdina ran away, despite being considered the strongest student in the second-year class. The reading confuses him because Celia didn't abandon him, but instead sought out the teacher to ask for help immediately. Leto comments that the story would sell much more with that dramatic touch, since nothing grabbed attention more than saying the arrogant Yurdina fled while a poor noble defeated the monsters. Ian asks who wrote the article to fix the distortion, but Leto advises him to give up as the person responsible would never listen to someone like him. Ian remembers the author as a haughty person who always ignored students from humble backgrounds, realizing the article wouldn't be changed. Even so, Ian worries about the damage to Celia, since rumors similar to Teen's insults are starting to spread. He mentions he already lectured some sophomores so they wouldn't speak their minds openly. Leto has a bad feeling, believing that Teen didn't have enough influence because he was a low-ranking noble, suggesting that someone else is planning the attacks from the shadows using information about the girl's lineage. Faced with this, Ian decides the first thing to do is to destroy Teen and his group to teach them a lesson. Looking for Celia, he finds her walking alone through the academy and calls her to find out what happened. However, Ian stops talking and asks what's wrong when he notices something on her head. Celia explains she heard people commenting on the lunch incident, saying they'd be ashamed to show their faces there again, but that she still needed to eat, being human despite having a lower-class mother, which shakes her again. The boy accuses her out loud of being picked up from the streets and having a different father. Celia doesn't know how they found out about her mother, but she decides to resolve the situation quickly. The boys mock her, asking why she looks scary and commenting that they were talking about someone random, but she got offended. Angry, the young woman clenches her jaw and charges at the two students to teach them a lesson. In the next instant, she steps into a hole made by digging magic on the ground. By reflex, Celia shifts her center of gravity to the other foot, but ends up stepping into another magic trap. She falls and the boys start laughing until one of them opens a bottle and pours wine on the girl's head. The boy pretends it was an accident, asks ironically if she's okay, and warns her that the street is dangerous. Celia concludes that the trap was prepared after the cafeteria episode, as using magic without previous chanting normally wouldn't be possible. In the present, she finishes the story telling Ian she decided not to fight so she wouldn't get into trouble. The protagonist gets furious, stating that the insults were enough reason for a reaction. However, she explains that the student apologized and didn't use her name directly. Devastated by the humiliation, a tear falls on Celia's hand, who fears causing trouble for her family if she does anything against them. Ian watches the scene silently for a moment. She thanks him for listening and says she feels fine now, but the young man disagrees. Celia replies she's fine because she has him by her side, while Ian leaves driven by hatred to confront the group. In a secluded spot, one of the students tells Teen how Celia fell into the magic traps and tripped when trying to attack them. Teen asks about the juice and the boy confirms he gave her a luxurious bath she couldn't afford. Then Then, they notice Ian's presence and ask if he needs something. Emanating an aura all over his body, he asks where they heard about Celia's private life. The redhead questions the protagonist's interest and asks why they should tell him anything. Before the boy finishes saying he wouldn't reveal his source, Ian slams him with a heavy punch, knocking him down. With a bleeding nose, the student screams, asking if he went crazy, pointing out that Ian is just a low-ranking noble. The protagonist pins him down with his sword and throws him away, knocking him out cold instantly. A blue-haired boy charges at Ian from behind, calling him a crazy bastard. The protagonist had already noticed his approach and hurls him away with a sword strike, taking down 2 threats with ease. Sheathing his sword, Ian looks at the remaining boys. He says he didn't expect them to confess right away, so he's going to beat them all up as much as possible to force them to apologize to Celia. Seeing how they hold their weapons, the protagonist notes that he must have knocked out the only magic users in the group. The only real threat was Teen, the best student among the third years. Ian's plan was simple: deal with the weakest ones first and leave Teen for last. 3 students charge with swords in hand, but Ian was ready and confident he'd end the fight quickly. He rushes in without leaving any openings and trades blows with the first one, who struggles to defend. The opponent tries to hold Ian's weapon, but the protagonist shouts to gain strength. Overpowering the defense, he slams the side of his sword into the boy's face, taking down another one. Before he can spot the remaining 2, Ian gets hit in the back. He notices them approaching as they jump together, aiming for a knockout. The protagonist barely blocks both weapons at the same time, losing his balance. With a great effort, he stays on his feet and pushes the duo away with a horizontal swing. Pulling his sword back, Ian strikes one of them in the head and immediately rushes the last boy. This time, he pulls out his axe instead of his sword, preparing his strike with pure rage. The opponent panics upon seeing the blade and gets defeated, leaving only one enemy on the field. Teen, who had only watched the battle until now, draws his weapon from his back and asks how Ian got so strong so fast. He asks if the protagonist received some miracle drug from Celia during their training. Ian asks how he knew about that, and the third year replies that consecutive victories over Yurdina put a spotlight on the protagonist at the academy. With killer intent, Teen charges swinging his gigantic blade. At the last second, Ian manages to block the attack, but his foot gets dragged back by the sheer force of the blow. The third year keeps pressing his opponent's defense, noting his own physical superiority. Thrown back, Ian struggles while Teen confidently declares he won't lose, since the protagonist was strong in swordsmanship but didn't have magic. Ian realizes that even though he can read his opponent's movements, the magic sword remains a challenge. He knows he's no match for Teen, since the enemy's speed and magic amplify his strength. Creating an explosion, Teen slams his magic sword into the ground, but Ian escapes just in time. Taking advantage of the opening, the third year delivers a fast strike, which his opponent barely blocks. Falling down, Ian supports himself to quickly return to a battle stance. Teen claims he's tough to bring down, but he won't win just by running away, and Ian, already at his limit, fires back saying he'll shut his enemy's mouth soon. The opponent replies he'd like to see him try, and that he'll admit defeat if Ian succeeds. Ian notes that the fight isn't fair, considering it the height of hypocrisy to hear such words from someone who provoked Celia just because she couldn't fight. Then, Teen charges with killer instinct and impressive speed to finish off the protagonist. Seeing the sword coming from above, Ian prepares to defend. However, the enemy feints mid-movement, changes the attack, and hits him dead on. Ian falls to the ground, fooled by the speed of the attack, but realizes he isn't seriously hurt. Teen approaches and mentions he's curious about something he saw during the first battle against Celia, where the protagonist dodged an impossible strike, as if bending reality. The third year asks how he did that, leading Ian to wonder if he was talking about the time he was possessed by the evil spirit. On his knees, the protagonist remembers that only masters can use spatial steps, a moment in which he has an epiphany and understands the situation. Using his topology classes, he notices the ground is soft and still holds several footprints from the previous fights, concluding that using the environment is the only way to win. Saying he's interested in the technique, Teen attacks again. Striking the ground, he throws Ian off balance. Ian tries to dodge and finally does a flip to stand up among the holes in the dirt. The protagonist puts his hand on his sword and waits, while the enemy asks if he wants to run away or give up already. Out of breath and reaching his limit, Ian waits for his opponent to get close. Shouting, Teen rushes in for the final blow, his foot leaving a new mark in the ground right before he lunges. In the next instant, Teen is already right next to Ian, who manages to dodge the charge quite easily. The enemy notices the protagonist's move. Ian already has his hatchet in hand and hits the opponent's face, even though Teen manages to block some of the impact. Ian thinks Teen is a monster for taking the hit, but realizes he still has another card up his sleeve. Ian throws himself at Teen, grabbing him and slamming him to the ground. As Ian puts his hands around his neck, the boy asks what he's doing. Then, Ian raises his axe, aiming at the enemy's head with the flat side of the blade, and tells him to stop daydreaming because it's time to shut up. Right after, Ian drives the weapon down onto Teen's forehead, knocking him out cold instantly. Still, he keeps beating his head out of revenge, believing people like this need to be humiliated so they don't repeat the same mistakes. When the beating session ends, everyone who picked on Celia is down. At that moment, Lupin, the third son of Count Ranella who was knocked down at the start of the fight, screams and asks how Ian dares to attack him. The boy demands that Ian get on his knees to be forgiven, but the protagonist throws his axe, which grazes past him and shuts him up. Ian runs toward Lupin and warns him that he seems to want to get crushed too, demanding to know how the opponent got Celia's private information. Lupin answers that he doesn't know anything, explaining that just some green-haired girl showed up and told them the story. Ian doubts his words, but walks past him while the boy keeps his head down. Putting his hand on Lupin's shoulder, Ian says he can't expect much from someone like him, warning that there won't be a next time. Leaving his opponents behind and figuring this payback will be enough to make them leave Celia alone, Ian swears to find the informant and crush her, wondering who she could be. During swordsmanship class, Celia watches the duels and looks for Ian without success. She feels embarrassed and flattered, wondering if he went out to avenge the attack on her. After that, Celia hears someone calling her an orphan and notices two girls laughing in her direction, cruelly mocking the absence of her mother. Angered by the taunts, Celia reaches for her sword hilt, but hesitates, calming herself down and letting go of her grip with an effort. Even with a classmate mocking her lack of manners and implying she was only half raised, Celia ignores the continuous insults. Then, Teen appears behind the group and tells them to stop, making the girls turn around ready to question the intervention. Teen warns them that they should stop if they don't want to end up like him. One of the girls tries to apologize, saying it was a misunderstanding about another acquaintance, but Teen replies there's no need for excuses, since that lunatic Ian attacked them like that without giving any chance for explanations. The girls realize it would be dangerous to keep picking on Celia when they notice that all the injured boys were beaten up by Ian. Teen and his group walk up to her, and one of the guys yells for everyone to stop staring, since it's not a show. Then, the boy bows, apologizing and promising not to bother her anymore. Celia replies there was no need to make a scene right now. Teen explains there's a reason for the public apology. If rumors spread, they would be ridiculed, so it's better to leave this impression than to take another beating from Ian. He says he still doesn't like Celia, but recognizes that the strength and support around her could ruin him, pointing out that finding allies is also a skill. As he leaves, Teen asks her to make sure Ian knows what happened, making Celia think he's smarter than she thought. The girls apologize too, promising it won't happen again, which leaves Celia confused on how to act. If she were alone, she would have just endured everything, believing she could do nothing. Still, she gets frustrated with herself for depending on Ian all the time. With that, she decides that next time she will definitely handle her problems on her own. At the Academy Hospital, the Saint calls out to Ian. She asks, annoyed, if he likes getting hurt, and brings up the rumor that he beat up 8 people the day before without sending a single one to the hospital. She explains she helped him because his reasons were good, but without her intervention, the Ranella family would have caused a massive scene. The Saint says the Count was furious about what happened to his son, who had complained to his parents about being used as a punching bag. Ian is sure the guy will still try to get revenge, and wonders what would happen if they pressured his family. The Saint says she defended him after learning the context of the fight, mentioning she owed him a favor. Ian asks what favor that is, and she replies as she leaves that she took something he gave her, suggesting it wasn't important. This leaves him completely confused, unable to remember if he ever gave her anything. Concluding that this must have happened during his possession period, he reflects on the week's events. He didn't know the Saint outside the academy, and he suspects her explanation to the Count wasn't just a simple excuse. Ian wonders what kind of massive favor he did for her to act this way. Next, Celine enters the hospital calling for Ian, curious about the trouble with Teen. She throws herself at him, asking if he's okay, a constant behavior he doesn't understand. Celine gets angry that Ian always sacrifices himself for Celia, but he replies that isn't the case. He says he would have done the exact same for her, since he promised he would always protect her. Celine notes that Ian remembers the promise, and he confirms it. In the past, nobles tried to steal Celine's family mines and attacked her uncle, leaving him bedridden. Seeing his friend like that, Ian made the decision to protect her forever. Celine hugs him, but the boy explains he will always look after her because he sees her as a younger sister. Frustrated by the rejection, Celine stomps on Ian's foot and shouts that he ruined the intimate moment on purpose. Ian asks what he did wrong, but the girl just tells him to forget it, refusing to explain anything to an idiot. Changing the subject, Celine wants to solve Celia's problems to get her out of their lives. The gossip about the girl was nothing new, but now the teasing was direct, coming even from strangers influenced by the rumors. Ian recalls that Leto said the same thing and asks if Celine has any idea who spread it. She rules out the second-year students because they always acted in groups. Ian remembers that Teen's group was also manipulated by someone. Ruling out the first years, who barely know Celia, they conclude the chance of it being a fourth year is much higher. Celine suggests Ian ask Leto to investigate, using his connections. The clues point to a fourth-year student, a high-ranking noble with green hair. With these traits, the search should be easier, leaving only the mastermind behind it all to be found. A few days later, Ian leaves the infirmary after the fight against Teen, feeling lonely without a welcoming crowd like before. On the way, he meets Emma's father, who greets him with a bow. Ian asks him to drop the formalities and inquires about the girl's condition. The father reports that Emma is barely holding on to life, and he doesn't know what to do anymore, but Ian assures him a miracle will save her. The man thanks Ian for eliminating the magic beast that attacked his daughter, saying he doesn't know how to repay him. Ian replies that he only did what he had to do, and declines the thanks. Emma's father says goodbye and leaves, leaving the boy thinking about how he can save her. Outside, Ian reflects on Leto's connections at the school, trusting his ability to run the investigation, even though the boy wanted a reward. Walking along, he finds Celia training with her sword, right where he figured she would be. Ian notices that Celia's aura seems stronger than the last time they fought. Watching her, he wonders again how he managed to defeat her twice in duels. When Celia finishes training, Ian asks if she's okay. Nervous and blushing deeply, the girl replies she can't feel fine when he isn't around, bowing right after. Realizing her slip of the tongue, she quickly composes herself and asks calmly about his condition. Ian replies he's fine as usual, and asks about the intense technique she was practicing. Celia explains it's her family's secret swordsmanship, the Golden Lion sword, which creates multiple simultaneous blade traces to confuse the opponent. Currently, she can make 3 traces, while an expert would make more than 10. Ian asks if it is okay for him to watch a secret technique. She allows it, saying he could never copy it anyway. Realizing she might sound arrogant, Celia quickly tries to correct herself, saying that he is already very strong. Ian agrees as humiliated tears fall from his eyes. The girl shouts an apology, but he calms her down, saying he does not mind. Ian feels relieved to see that Celia seems to understand other people's feelings better now. Then, she thanks him for everything he has done for her after hearing about yesterday's events. Holding her hands, Ian tells her not to worry and says they will always help each other. Smiling under the moonlight, he declares they are friends. Celia blushes deeply as he tells her not to worry so much. With her face burning and a shy smile, she replies that her situation is not that bad, and she will solve her own problems. Finding her sudden attitude change strange, Ian says a bit nervously that she can come to him if anything happens. She asks if she said something wrong, but he changes the subject and suggests they get back to training. While Celia practices the technique, Ian notices her aura is much more stable and spots a difference. When she finishes the movement, he asks if her aura changed color. She confirms it blankly, making Ian exclaim that this is a big deal. The shade is now a vivid blue. Since the aura reflects the subconscious, a color change represents something huge. But Celia says she has not felt any internal changes lately. Ian wonders if this could be linked to her mother's case being exposed. Celia's expression darkens, and she says that although it hurts when people bring it up, she does not think that is the reason, since it happened a long time ago. She explains that her mother was kicked out of the Yurdina family when she was only 6 years old. At the time, the woman begged not to be separated from her daughter, but Celia's father called the knights to throw her out immediately. In an instant, the guards disfigured the woman's face, but she kept trying to reach her daughter until the end. Afraid of being banished too, Celia confesses she pretended she did not see anything. Her mother ended up leaving, and Celia's older sister, who was standing next to her, warned her that she would face the same fate if she did not prove herself useful. Since then, she dedicated everything to swordsmanship to prove her worth to her family. Ian asks if that is why she wants to defeat the future heiress, but Celia explains that although that was her initial plan, now she just wants to prove to herself that she is not weak. She assures him she is fine, especially since she has Ian by her side now. Thinking he cannot leave her alone, Ian says she just needs to win the festival, since defeating her sister in a duel would be almost impossible, but her chances at the event are much better. Elsewhere, the green-haired girl mentions to Delphine about Celia's desire to participate in the hunting festival. Delphine replies that it does not matter, because leaking the story about her rival's mother was just a way to say hello. She declares she will crush Celia personally. After training ends, Ian remembers he needs to finish reading the letter from the future, which he had almost forgotten about. He tells her he has something to do before they leave, but before he can go, Celia grabs him by the sleeve of his overcoat. She gathers her courage and asks if he would like to have breakfast with her. Ian agrees to go to the cafeteria together, but Celine suddenly appears. calling him a terrible senior and asking if training is over. Seeing Celia nearby, Celine treats her with hostility, while Celia just greets her back. Then, Celine asks if Ian was going to eat breakfast, grabs his arm, and invites him to eat just the two of them, like they usually do. Ian asks since when they have that habit, but she is already pulling him away. Celia holds Ian back and says no, making him wonder what is going on and drawing the attention of the people around them. Celine asks if Celia needs something from her Ian, leaving him dumbfounded, but Celia just tells her to let go of his arm. Ian's friend fires back, asking who she thinks she is to get in their way. Celine claims that Celia is just excited about his attention, but says he only got close to her out of pity. Ian quickly denies it, and Celia realizes Celine really is not a good person. Celia comments that the girl seems like the type who talked behind her back when she was still called the arrogant Yurdina. Celine screams, asking if Celia wants to make her look bad, but Celia just throws the question back, stepping closer and confirming her rival's point. She declares she will keep pretending to be miserable just to stay with Ian forever. Losing her patience, Celine grabs her sword, and Celia dares her to draw the weapon already, warning that she will not hold back against her after that. Ian shouts at the two of them to stop fighting. Right after, he leaves and asks them to leave him alone for a while, frustrating the girls who just lost their chance to be close to him. Somewhere else, Ian takes a drink while Leto watches him in silence. Ian talks about the situation with the girls and explains he left them behind because he couldn't stand being there anymore. Leto comments that the situation is enviable and that Ian doesn't realize he has two girls liking him. He adds that Celine's feelings must be messy because of the new rival. Ian complains that his friend was the one who started that topic and decides to change the subject, asking about the investigation. Leto tells him not to rush, as he asks several of his girlfriends and ex-girlfriends to look for the girl. He points out it wouldn't be a real investigation if they found her right away. Ian then asks if it's possible for a letter to come from the future. Leto asks what's wrong with him for saying such weird things, and Ian decides to prove it by pulling the letter from his clothes. He tells his friend to look, but Leto only sees Ian's empty hand and asks if he lost his mind, passing his hand through the object as if it's a hologram. Realizing only he can see the paper, Ian tries to explain the recent incidents he had to deal with because of the letter. Ian mentions that the text warned about an extremely strong magic beast at the hunting festival. Leto thinks that's only natural since the fourth-year students are participating. Ian tries to emphasize the danger, but ends up repeating the same information, making Leto question why he needs to highlight an event the whole academy already knows about. Realizing he can't speak clearly about the content of the letter, Ian just stands there staring at nothing. Leto decides to give him the benefit of the doubt and guesses that a time distortion is happening only to Ian. Leto explains that these distortions require very powerful magic and have a time limit, with severe restrictions since they break the laws of the world. Ian remembers Emma mentioned the same thing, but he still doesn't understand. Leto uses the festival beast as an example, asking how it would have been defeated in the future for the letter to be written in the first place. He concludes that this paradox throws the order of things into chaos, making information from the future highly dangerous. Ian asks if it's possible to destroy the world with this, and Leto confirms it, warning him to be careful with any wrong move. The sender of the letter wanted to avoid trouble. If the time distortion is happening to Ian and his information is limited, all he has to do is nothing strange and everything will be fine. Ian concludes he could still destroy everything, and that, as a low noble from the countryside, he wouldn't know how to handle this alone. Walking through the academy, he wonders what he should do from this point on. Someone calls out to Ian and approaches from behind. He turns around, and a much shorter girl asks if he's the one who beat up her younger brother. The next second, Ian finds himself surrounded by several other students walking with the girl. Lupin is right next to her, whispering in her ear, so Ian wonders if she is here for revenge, which makes him think. The girl, named Elsie, claims the Ranella family would never stay quiet after what he did. She is the leader of a major faction in the academy, and not even the saint could calm everyone down. Ian concludes the best option is to take a beating to avoid a bigger mess. Right after, a loud noise echoes near the two siblings who stopped their argument. One of Elsie's friends is knocked out cold on the ground, and no one understands what happened until they see a hand raised in the distance. A blonde girl appears before the group, drawing everyone's attention. Ian recognizes her as she apologizes for the attack, while Elsie takes a combat stance. The newcomer is Delphine Yurdina, who approaches asking why they don't stop putting up resistance in front of other students. Delphine claims that sight is unpleasant. Elsie replies that she seems to keep acting rude as always, and the two stand face to face. Delphine tells her opponent to get out of the way, but Elsie tells her to shut up and go another way. It is the first time Ian sees the girl up close, as he had only seen her in newspapers before. Ian considers talking to her because she's Celia's sister, but he decides it's better to leave without being noticed. Right then, one of Elsie's classmates grabs Ian by the shoulder, asking where he thinks he's going and if he believes he can run away. The boy replies that he'd never dare to do that. The student draws his sword to fight, but a scream catches everyone's attention. Elsie assumes Delphine likes Ian, saying she'd let her have him for one night and would take care of him the next day. As she walks away, Elsie asks what Delphine is going to do, since Ian did that to her younger sister, which makes the boy find the conversation strange. After that, someone screams in pain amidst a trail of blood, making both girls turn around. Ian is standing while Elsie's classmate is lying on the ground holding his arm. Ian calls out to Elsie and says she can say whatever she wants about him, but she should have never involved Celia in this mess. The girls watch the scene. Then, Ian asks how Elsie plans to pay the price for saying that. Elsie screams that Ian is trying to attack her, and her classmates step in front to defend her. With a quick leap, the young man strikes one of them in the head, knocking him out immediately. The blonde boy falls to the ground, spraying blood, and the impact is so strong it even shatters the floor. Next, another boy charges with his sword. Ian dodges every blow without struggle and closes the distance between them. Using his hatchet, he parries the opponent's attack, making the boy fall. Taking advantage of the opening, he approaches with his weapon raised, claims the opponent is too slow, and with just one hit, slams his head into the ground. Now, the protagonist stands in the middle of the knocked out students. Suddenly, Ian dodges a massive lightning bolt that crashes down next to him. He comments that this is how things have to be as he sees Elsie pointing her staff at him. The young man calls her to fight right there, since he already took care of the bugs around them. Elsie claims he has completely lost his mind and asks if Ian really thinks he can defeat her, to which he replies there's no way to know without trying. Without hesitating, Ian takes a massive leap and ends up right behind Elsie. He strikes the ground and the force of the blow launches the girl away, though she manages to defend herself. With difficulty, she asks if he thought he'd break her full-body shield. Threateningly, Ian warns that he'll try again to see how long her defense lasts. Elsie says he's delusional. She admits his movements are decent since he defeated her followers, but she guarantees a third year would never beat her. Before she finishes talking, Ian charges and slams the hatchet against the shield, which startles the girl. While she tries to curse at him, the young man pierces the barrier with his hands, grabs Elsie's head, and slams it all the way into the ground. Raising his hatchet, Ian comments that she was way too confident and asks if she'll keep talking after having her defense destroyed. He strikes the shield continuously, making it crack bit by bit. Still confident, Elsie doubts he can break the barrier and plans to use magic while he swings his weapon. However, she realizes she's in deep trouble as soon as Ian raises his axe once more. Elsie's shield explodes in front of everyone, while Delphine just watches the scene standing still. The girl raises her staff with her hands shaking violently. Around them, the others are shocked to realize the protagonist broke the defense using nothing but brute strength. Desperate, Elsie begs him to stop and starts screaming for help. Ian asks if his opponent is going to beg for her life now, since he thought she was ready to fight to the death after talking trash about Celia. The girl asks if he really plans to eliminate her for that and screams that she doesn't want to die. Raising his axe one last time, Ian says that if she didn't want to die, she shouldn't have started this mess. To the young man, death is an essential part of a battle for someone's honor. He brings the weapon down with all his strength, but hits only the ground. After his opponent braces for the worst, Ian warns her that he will let the insult slide just this once. The protagonist stands up to leave, while the others look away in fear. Then, someone calls out to him, and Ian turns to see who it is. Delphine asks if she can take some of his time in the near future, as she wishes to speak about a private matter. During the afternoon, in another part of the academy, Leto laughs at Ian and mentions he didn't know he was the axe murderer the students are talking about. The protagonist sighs and asks if his friend wants a taste of that fear too, but Leto keeps joking. The boy quickly changes the subject and says he knows Ian met Delphine. The protagonist confirms this, and when asked what she wanted, he replies that he has no idea, but he's meeting her tonight. Ian wants to know if Leto has any information on who started bullying Celia, and the boy confirms he does, which is why he looked for him. Handing Ian a paper, Leto tells him to read it. Opening the sheet, which is actually quite large, the protagonist analyzes the content. Teasing him, Leto asks what's wrong, since he thought his friend wouldn't stay calm after reading that message. Ian avoids a direct answer, claiming he feels calm for some unknown reason. They already had some clues, and when thinking about the reasons for the bullying, Ian figured it could be for that exact reason. Leto asks if this confirms the protagonist's previous suspicions based on the information provided. Ian says yes, and Leto asks what they'll do now. The protagonist decides he will see the person in question first, and only after her answer will he decide how to act. In the middle of the forest, Celia sits on a rock, thinking about Ian. Holding a paper, she concludes that he fought for her once again. Elsie only went after the boy because he beat up the people who started the bullying. Just when Celia thought she could handle the situation alone, she ends up being helped again, which embarrasses her. Ian appears before her and asks why she looks so sad, making her jump in surprise at his presence. Crumpling the paper and hiding it behind her back, the girl apologizes for the mess caused the other day. She says she even treated Celine very badly for no apparent reason. Ian replies that she doesn't need to worry, as he was also irritated at the time. Since he's not angry anymore, he tells Celia she can relax. She protests, arguing that she just watches while being helped, and that he fought someone because of her, even getting Elsie involved. Ian says it's fine, and that she can trust him whenever she needs to. He explains that when either of them is in trouble, they should rely on each other. Ian finishes by saying that next time, maybe she will be the one helping him, which makes the girl understand the situation better. Gathering her courage, Celia stammers and asks to hug Ian. The boy is confused by the request, but before he can answer, she is already hugging him. Ian doesn't understand what's happening. Celia doesn't let go, taking advantage of the fact that Celine isn't around to get in the way. Later, the girl snaps out of it, lets go of him, and tries to explain herself, saying that was what her mother used to do when she cried. Celia asks if she made him uncomfortable, clarifying that she got carried away and didn't mean to upset him with the hug. Looking at the ground, she notices a sepia flower blooming there. That seemed unusual, since those flowers only grow in the north, and it's the first time she has seen one in the southern forest. Ian immediately remembers that the sender of the letter used the alias Sepia. The reason he got close to the girl was to find out her identity, so this is a great opportunity. Ian asks if Celia likes that specific flower. She says she does, because her mother used to like it, which made her love it too. Ian wonders if that's why the person signed the letter with that nickname, since the flower must have been very important to her. The letter also said the two of them got much closer during the hunting festival. This makes Ian wonder if Celia and Sepia are the same person, and if she's the one he'll marry in the future. He quickly stops these thoughts, remembering the girl is his junior and he needs to focus on his work. He tells Celia he wants to ask her a personal question, and she gets curious. Ian asks if Delphine is already set to be the family heir, or if Celia has a chance instead. The girl answers she isn't qualified to become the successor because Delphine has all the power and support. Ian wonders if the older sister wants to control her, since both are the chief's daughters, and a fight for leadership would have an uncertain winner. Celia interrupts Ian, explaining she never challenged her sister and always acted obediently. She says Delphine warned her that she'd be kicked out if she stopped being useful. That's why she always focused on her duties, at least until she decided to join the hunting festival. Celia asks why Ian is so interested in this, but he avoids the question. The boy only replies that he might have to fight Delphine in the near future. That's why Ian wanted to know what kind of person Delphine is. At night, at the high-ranking noble's dormitory, Aedelas Hall, a butler appears to take him to the meeting place. The conversation is private, and the boy seems a bit nervous about the new rumors that are about to spread in the academy. Once announced, he walks in with determination to find out the truth. He asks for permission to enter, while Delphine welcomes him and tells him to come closer. The boy sees she's wearing only a robe and asks if the older girl can change her clothes, but she talks back, asking if he doesn't like what he sees. Ian quickly replies that she's very beautiful. Delphine thanks him for the compliment and tells him to sit down. Sitting in a chair, Ian respectfully suggests it'd be a good idea for her to be mindful of her appearance in front of a man. While pouring wine into a glass, Delphine says there's no need for that. She argues that seeing beautiful things makes people want to own them, and most women cover themselves because male desires can be harmful. However, since no one in this place can have her, she doesn't see a reason to worry about such silly things. Ian agrees with her, and the girl comments that he seems naive. The boy explains he was born in the countryside and doesn't understand these things. Delphine tells him he should start getting used to it, subtly trying to seduce him. Changing the subject, Delphine asks Ian to ally with her, calling him the Axe Prince. She claims she's never met anyone so interesting and brave, promising that the alliance would bring huge benefits. The boy quickly brushes off any illusions and figures she must have some dark motive. He can't believe this woman is actually trying to win him over, wondering if she's truly interested in him or if there are hidden intentions. Before giving an answer, Ian asks a question. He asks if she's aware of what's been happening to Celia. Delphine confirms she's heard about it and comments that the culprits must not know fear to mess with a Yerdina. The boy reveals he found a student who leaked Celia's personal information and that she visited this very dormitory. Pouring wine into her glass, Delphine asks where he's going with this conversation. Ian decides to lay out the whole picture. He explains that the person behind the rumors needed connections and status to influence others, and also spread private information that only family members would know. Considering these facts, the boy concludes that only Delphine fits the clues. The girl smiles and confesses she thought he was reckless, but now realizes he's actually very thorough. Delphine asks why she would want to torment her own sister. Ian knows she's acting irrationally just because Celia challenged her. The girl agrees with Ian's theory, but points out the lack of evidence. The boy says he can just look for the green-haired student, but Delphine interrupts him. Delphine confesses she's behind the attacks on her sister. She planned to leave her completely isolated, but decided to teach her a lesson when Celia said she would challenge her at the hunting festival. Ian finds it strange that Celia actually told her own master that, since he believed her intention was just to prove her worth. Delphine then asks if Ian wants to ally with her, since she likes his skills. The boy grabs his axe and shatters the wine glass with a single strike, but Delphine keeps her composure. Ian rejects the offer, saying that working for someone as despicable as her would be annoying. Delphine asks if she was being that obvious, and placing the broken glass on the table, warns him that she still has more for him. In a swift motion, she draws a dagger from her thigh and points it at Ian's neck. She says she can't let his attitude go unpunished. Even at a disadvantage, Ian speaks as if his life isn't in danger. Delphine replies that she needed protection, and her robe begins to slide down her body. Pulling the dagger out of the boy's reach, she says her interest in him grew a lot after their talk. Few people can avoid hesitating at a crucial moment, which makes her want Ian as her personal subordinate to train him well. Ian guarantees she'll regret it if she tries to do that. The girl scoffs, saying she doesn't regret her actions, and the day she does will be the day of her defeat. After that, she suggests leaving things as they are, since it's already time for him to go. Ian pulls his axe to eliminate the girl, warning that he isn't ready to end the matter yet. Delphine notices Ian's move before he finishes it. With a feint, she dodges the strike, which grazes her back and draws a trickle of blood. Delphine prepares her counterattack, thinking the boy still has a long way to go. She easily disarms the protagonist, sending the axe flying from his hands. She thinks the ambush would have worked on anyone else. She ducks and prepares her final blow, wondering if it's worth making Ian lose his will entirely. The girl aims her strike at him, but a sound from the wine glass on the floor interrupts everything. Delphine's blade is still clean, stopping the attack right next to Ian's neck. The boy draws his sword in time and presses it against Delphine's neck, leaving her impressed. Ian draws his sword without hesitation because he wasn't going to end everything in a single blow. He explains that Delphine was wrong to call him the Axe Prince, since his real weapon is the sword. The girl asks if he intends to finish her off right there. Ian wasn't actually going to kill her, but she claims he didn't win the fight either. Ian asks what she means, arguing that pushing her to that point is already a victory. Delphine agrees that this is the first time she's been pushed so hard in her life, thinking she got too greedy, but repeats that he didn't win. Ian says she's very stubborn until his words are cut short. Delphine calls him the Axe Prince again and says the result of the battle still needs to be settled. As Delphine moves closer, her robe slips completely off. She awkwardly tries to cover herself while Ian turns his face away, babbling nonsensically. The noise catches the attention of someone outside, who asks if Delphine is okay and says they came to check on her. The girl shouts that she's fine. A maid in the hallway finds her master's tone strange and decides to open the door to make sure everything is all right. She finds Delphine naked, while Ian looks toward the door. The maid quickly apologizes for her rude behavior of entering without permission and runs away. Delphine shouts after her that it's not what she thinks. Taking advantage of the situation, Ian bends down to grab his axe. Wanting to escape, he goes to the door, says he lost the fight, wishes her goodnight, and leaves. The door closes, leaving Delphine alone, thinking about what just happened between them. The day begins outside the academy, where students talk about what happened to senior Delphine. A green-haired boy mentions Ian going to her room and causing a mess, claiming he threatened her with an axe. The students comment that Ian seems unstable, and even those who knew him for 3 years theorize he might have hidden his true nature. Ian appears and tells them to shut up. The boys claim they aren't saying anything wrong, but they quickly scream and run away, calling him the Axe Prince. Ian notes that yet another strange rumor about him has spread. He wonders how the story from last night spread so fast, thinking someone must have done it on purpose. Then, he notices a memo about the hunting festival schedule. Reading the notice, he remembers he decided to participate but hasn't registered yet. The problem is his team only has him and Celia, so they need to recruit more people, preferably a mage for the rear. Ian considers inviting Leto, but his classmate flatly refuses and flips him the bird. Ian tries to convince him with a cute face, which only makes the other guy more annoyed. After the constant rejections, Ian gives up on the invite and asks him to at least introduce a mage. After remembering some competent people, Leto tells Ian to follow his instructions. Looking at a newspaper on the table with a headline about the possible end of the infamous Elsie Ranella, Leto promises he will definitely find a mage for him. In another location, filled with boxes and barrels, Elsie beats up a student who begs for forgiveness. She warns him that her defeat doesn't give them the right to mock her. She proposes to overlook the offense if the boy endures 10 seconds of beatings in silence, slamming him repeatedly while the others watch. Someone asks what Elsie is doing. The girl turns around with pure hatred and tells them not to interrupt her, but she freezes when she recognizes Ian standing in front of her. With his hand on his axe, the boy smiles and asks if he can take a bit of her time. Terrified, Elsie shrieks in fear, and soon one of her followers begins to run away. With her head down, the girl says everyone already left, obeying his orders. Ian recalls Leto's advice to coerce her, thinking that acting like this makes him a horrible person, but he ignores the thought and reassures her he just wants to talk. Trembling with nerves, Elsie says she doesn't want to talk, but Ian approaches and reaches his hand toward her face, making her scream in despair. Backing away quickly, she promises to do whatever he wants as long as he keeps the axe away. Ian starts patting her head as if she's a tamed animal, which surprises her. With a light smile, he mentions that things must have been tough for her lately. Holding back her tears, Elsie wipes them away and calls him a bastard, shouting that everyone is mocking her defeat because of him. Ian replies that people only say that because it's true. He tries to leave it at that, but the girl keeps complaining that it's all his fault. Ian disagrees, saying his plan was to get beaten up by her group to put an end to the matter, but a certain person showed up at the last second. Remembering Delphine, a harsh expression appears on Elsie's face. Ian confirms he's talking about her and asks if the girl wants to get revenge, making her ask how that's even possible. Ian explains that the oldest Yerdina wants to win this year's hunting festival to honor her family, and a defeat would bring disgrace to her name. Liking the idea, Elsie comments that her rival deserves to fail. Ian then proposes that she join his group for the event, but the girl questions why she should team up with him. Ian gives her a threatening look, and she quickly backs down. He admits that Elsie doesn't like him very much, but asks if she's just going to watch Delphine win the competition. The girl admits she gets angry just picturing her rival showing off, and Ian repeats that they can win if they work together. After thinking about the offer for a moment, Elsie finally agrees to join, even though she feels like she's being tricked somehow, which makes Ian happy. With Elsie on board, the team gets magic support to wait for the perfect moment to strike with full force. Ian will be on the front lines blocking attacks and creating openings on the sides for Celia to land powerful hits. However, since he's the only one responsible for defense, the group needs a fourth member. Ian thinks of Celine, since her family are hunters, and her synergy makes her perfect for this setup. Still, there is the problem that the girls don't get along at all. Ian worries about making them work together, but decides he has to convince them no matter what. Right after, Celia pulls on the collar of Ian's shirt, making him ask what she's doing. In a weak voice, she asks what he was doing with her older sister the night before. He tries to explain the story, but his words don't sound convincing. Annoyed, Celia grabs him by his clothes and complains that he was thinking of another girl. Ian shouts that he was just answering her question, making her let go of him and assume her sister wants him for herself. Nervous about this possibility, Celia starts biting her nails. Seeing this, Ian wonders if another rumor about him has started. Changing the subject, he tells her the team members are set and that he invited Elsie to be their mage. Celia gets excited and comments that, with this addition, they won't have to worry about their offensive power. Right after, Ian reveals that the last member invited is Celine, making Celia annoyed because she thinks her presence will cause useless arguments. Ian argues that there's nobody as skilled as the hunter, noting that the two girls are like oil and water. Determined to win, he places his hand on Celia's shoulder and admits it might be hard to tolerate her company. Finally, taking on a romantic tone, Ian asks if she can't just trust him this time. Celia quickly changes her mind and agrees, making Ian glad he already convinced the first member. Now he just needs to convince Celine to complete the team, though he still wonders if she'll accept the invitation. Back at the academy, Ian finds Celine sitting on a bench and asks how she's doing since she hadn't noticed his presence. She gets up and immediately starts apologizing for what happened before. Ian replies that she doesn't need to worry about that because these things happen. Celine then asks if they're good now and invites him to grab something to eat the next day since they haven't done that in a long time. Ian accepts, but takes the opportunity to ask if she'd like to join his team for the hunting festival. He explains that he's teaming up with Celia, and they still need more people, acknowledging that the two of them don't get along. Before he can argue further, Celine cuts him off. She agrees to join their team and confirms her decision, explaining that they work really well together and she needs to be with him. Ian thinks she accepted way too fast, but this makes him more excited than worried. With Celia and Elsie on the team, both among the best in the academy, they won't have to worry about offensive power. Plus, Ian already knows the weakness of the strongest monster that will appear. The main issue is teamwork because one always looks for a fight while the other lacks social skills. Since Celia and Celine argue constantly, the mission won't be easy, and they absolutely must learn to work together to win the festival. Ian starts a safe training session by putting them against each other, wondering if they'd fight among themselves in a real emergency. During training, Celia and Celine stand side by side without making eye contact, while Elsie and Ian watch the awkward situation in silence. Elsie complains that this can't be called a team because of their rivalry, but Ian pokes the mage's shoulder. Seeing his acts, she apologizes for acting snobby, promising to change her attitude as soon as he asks with a scary smile. Since things are already hard enough, the mage doesn't need to make it worse, even though she claims it's impossible to train like this. Celine asks what they're talking about while Celia just watches in silence, complaining that it'd be better to postpone training until tomorrow if they're just going to chat. Then, Ian announces that a special guest will join them soon. Elsie doubts a low-ranking noble would have connections for that, but she's suddenly interrupted. A huge explosion goes off right next to the group, startling everyone, and Elsie screams, asking what's going on. When the dust settles, Professor Derek appears and asks if the students want to become hunters. Ian, Celine, and Celia agree by bowing to the professor, but Elsie protests, saying she has no interest in that. Ian quickly shows his axe again, making the mage change her mind instantly and confirm her participation. Without delay, Derek announces the start of the test to measure their combat proficiency, warning them that they have to find him and fight him. The professor gives the students 2 hours to find him. Elsie claims the task will be easier than he thinks, but in the next second, Derek vanishes. Before the four youths, there's only the forest with no signs of anyone passing through, marking the start of their search for the monster professor. During the walk, Celia comments on Derek's incredible ability to hide his presence, and Ian suggests the professor should have made the test easier. Celine points out that with a careful search, they'll find some trace of him. Ian praises his classmate for her experience from a family of hunters, and she takes the chance to jab that spoiled nobles would never notice these details. Elsie snaps back that even she can understand that, while Celia defends her own hunting experience. Celine asks why they're so annoyed, and Celia replies that she thinks it's wrong to be judged just because she's a noble. Cutting off the argument, Ian warns that he found Derek's tracks and tells the group to follow that way. Celine praises Ian, asking if he's this good because he's used to hunting with her. He tells her to focus on what matters, but she insists on bringing up the first time they went out together. Celia interrupts Celine, demanding focus from the team, which annoys Celine and makes her ask if the noble is jealous of her conversation with Ian. Celia denies the accusation, and Celine claims she was only invited to fill the minimum team size. Losing her patience, Celia tells her to stop talking nonsense. Celine starts shouting, complaining about her classmates' arrogance, until a foot appears on a branch above them. Derek gets the group's attention, asking if they forgot that magic beasts don't just run away. Ian realizes the professor's intention and tells everyone to run. Derek leaps from the tree to the ground, causing a massive explosion on the spot. The professor points out that the students weren't hiding their presence and were still fighting among themselves, warning them that he has nothing to teach them this way. Quickly, Derek notices that Ian and Celine are unharmed, having escaped the explosion thanks to support magic cast with impressive speed by Elsie. He recognizes the mage's skill and she agrees, claiming to be the best in the 4th year. Teleporting to Elsie's side, the professor snatches the staff from her hands, pointing out that the team failed to protect their mage, and punches the girl. Ian realizes they need to regroup to regain the advantage, but Celia is already charging. The boy shouts to try and stop her, but she's already in front of Derek. The professor easily dodges the strike, explaining that she should work with the team, and knocks her down with a simple blow to the back of her neck. With the team down 2 members, Derek walks toward Ian and Celine, asking what they plan to do. Celia is still conscious on the ground, unlike Elsie. Ian asks Celine to help Celia, arguing that their classmate is the strongest, and this would increase the group's chances. Celine refuses immediately, claiming they can win the fight easily even without the other girl. Ian asks if she's serious about refusing to help in a situation like this, and Celine just complains about how much he cares about Celia. Derek interrupts the argument, reminding them that monsters don't run away or wait. The professor claims the group is a mess with 0 teamwork, as all 4 students end up flat on the ground after the confrontation. While Celine tries to get up, Derek calls her by her full name and asks why she is even on that team. Ian realizes the girls keep fighting over everything, completely going against his expectation of cooperation, and decides he needs to take action to win the competition. At night, in the girls' dormitory, Celine leaves the faucet running while thinking about Ian. She remembers the times he pampered and protected her during their childhood, and upon leaving the bathroom, finds a piece of paper on the floor. The note written by Ian asks her to go to the Eastern Forest at 10:30 so they can talk. Celine wonders if she's going to get scolded about the training, or if he plans to confess his feelings to her in that place. Walking through the forest, the girl blushes as she looks up. In the middle of the night, she finds Ian still fully dressed and asks what he wants at this hour. Getting straight to the point, Ian asks how long she plans to pick fights with Celia. Celine starts cursing her absent classmate, but Ian points out that Celine is the one instigating it, forcing the mage to admit she did it on purpose out of irritation before getting cut off. Ian tells her they should settle this once and for all, and throws a sword in her direction. Celine asks why he's saying these things and if the sword is real. Ian confirms it is, stating that this way she won't be able to make excuses, and declares declares that the winner of the duel will call the shots. Drawing his own weapon, the boy reminds her that they've always settled things this way. Celine remembers their past fights, comments that he hasn't changed at all, and picks up the weapon, accepting the duel. Taking her combat stance, the girl asks for the victory condition, and Ian replies that whoever surrenders loses. In the next instant, Celine charges, delivering a side strike that forces Ian back. The girl shows great strength, raising her weapon ready for a violent attack. An explosion on the ground blasts Ian backward, revealing that Celine's magic is stronger than he expected. Recovering his footing, he asks if she took some potion to get this strong. Out of breath, Celine replies that the evil spirit that possessed him in the past taught her something. It was much better to put all her strength into a single blow. At first, she thought it made no sense, but the attack actually works, and Ian ends up on his knees. He gets annoyed by the situation, while Celine warns him that she's definitely going to win and tells him to get ready. The girl quickly closes the distance and unleashes a vertical strike, putting more power into every swing. Ian knows a single hit would mean the end of the fight, but he notices her movements are getting slower. After one of her attacks, Celine leaves a massive opening, creating the perfect moment for a counterattack. He lunges forward with a thrust, but she dodges with a side roll. In the next instant, the girl gets behind Ian, ready to finish the duel. He tries to turn around with a vertical slash, but Celine warns him that he won't be able to block using only one hand and aims for his legs. Immediately, Ian throws his sword upward and pulls out his axe, managing to block at the last second. He tries to hit her right after, but the girl dodges and only takes a scratch. Surprised, he asks how she managed to dodge that. Celine explains that everyone already knows he uses an axe now. Realizing the need to change his strategy, Ian charges holding his sword and throws the axe at her. The girl was already expecting this and asks if he thinks the throw would change anything, preparing her defense. Next, she notices the sword also being thrown at her, manages to defend, and asks if he lost his mind. Quickly, Ian closes the distance with a jump and grabs the axe in midair. With a vertical strike aiming at his opponent's hands, he disarms her. Celine falls to the ground and tries to recover her weapon, while the boy charges and grabs his sword. Ian warns her that she was too slow and decides to aim for his friend's arm to avoid hurting her badly before the festival. Desperate, Celine turns to defend herself and both charge for the attack. However, Ian notices that his strike would end up hitting the girl's heart if he doesn't change its path immediately. To avoid the worst, he uses his own arm to stop Celine's attack, which leaves a blade stained with blood while stopping his sword close to her chest. The girl watches the scene on her knees with teary eyes. Ian places his hand on her head and says he won the fight. Celine is moved and says he needs urgent treatment, but the boy only asks her to apologize to Celia and do her best during the hunting festival. Celine asks if that was really what Ian wanted and if there was nothing else she could do. Ian collapses to the ground unconscious before answering, and Celine screams the boy's name. Morning comes with Ian back at the Academy Hospital, his arm covered in bandages. He wakes up and Celine tells him he is finally awake. Ian asks if the girl spent the night there. Celine confirms this and mentions his injuries were light, which the boy agrees with since he doesn't feel much pain. Next, Celine turns to the door as Celia enters the infirmary. Ian asks the reason for her visit, and Celia replies that the saint had informed her about his serious injuries. Celine decides to do what Ian asked and stands up to get Celia's attention. She apologizes for always picking fights and promises not to do it again. Ian watches the scene and reflects that Celia has the final decision to forgive her. Celia says Celine's behavior didn't bother her anymore, accepts the apology, and takes part of the blame, asking only for the two of them to get along from now on. The girls shake hands and decide to change their attitude to become friends. Ian concludes that the result was better than expected and increases the team's chances in the festival. Since the group is talented and the main obstacle was their internal conflicts, now they can improve their teamwork. After that, the saint appears in the room, noticing everyone's improvement. With an intimidating stance, the saint asks the girls to leave so she can treat Ian. The boy wonders why she changed her attitude so suddenly. Celine asks the saint to take good care of Ian, and the woman agrees, but warns that the girl should make sure he doesn't get hurt anymore. Celine understands the warning and leaves the room. The saint asks Celia to leave too. The girl asks if she can stay, but the saint asks if she is Ian's fiancée or mistress. Celia quickly denies it, shouting. The saint decides it is best for her to leave and pushes her out of the room. Next, the saint closes the door and asks to see Ian's arm. The boy shows her his arm and points out that she did not need to overreact to get the girls out. The saint grabs him tightly and asks if he was hurting himself on purpose just to impress the girls. She explains that he will not be able to take any more injuries, but Ian replies that the way she is holding him will make him endure even more pain. The saint warns that Ian has been getting hurt constantly lately and could suffer permanent damage if he keeps this up. Facing this possibility, he promises to be more careful. The priestess reinforces that this is her official advice and says that if he plans to join the hunting festival, he should just give up. since his body is at its limit. Even though he knows she is right, Ian thinks he cannot just quit, because there is more at stake than just his injuries. The saint asks the boy to promise to be more careful, and he agrees. Just then, Yurin, the saint's assistant, enters the infirmary. He asks if anything serious happened while he was away for the past month. Ian asks if he went to the Holy Kingdom, and Yurin confirms he went there to resolve some issues. The priestess welcomes him back and asks if he recovered the item. After apologizing for the delay, explaining that someone resisted handing it over, the assistant passes a small box with a red orb, explaining it is the blood crystal. Since Ian does not recognize the object, Yurin explains it is a unique holy treasure. It can boost the saint's healing powers to crazy levels and save anyone who is not dead yet. The assistant adds that they could save Emma's life with the orb. The priestess explains that the item is extremely precious and can only be used in emergencies with special permission from the Holy Kingdom, regretting that she cannot use it to heal the girl. Ian says he understands the situation. Then, the saint asks him again to keep his promise to take care of himself, and she leaves the room with Yurin. Alone, Ian reflects that if he had a choice, he would not join the festival, but he promised Celia they would win the competition. Besides, the remains of a high-ranking magic beast could work a miracle and save Emma, not to mention that ignoring the warnings in the letter could lead to a massive tragedy. Apologizing to the saint in his head, he decides he will do everything he can to avoid getting badly hurt during the event. After being discharged, Ian removes his bandages and tests his hand, noticing it healed completely in just one night. Days pass with team training and lessons with the professor until the day of the festival arrives. Already gathered with his group near the event tents, Ian asks if they can head to the venue. Elsie comments that she is impressed they managed to stay together until now, hoping they will at least not get in each other's way. Ian replies that they did their best during training, but the girl points out that real combat is different. The boy agrees, saying they should at least be able to work in sync until something cuts him off. A blade is thrown right at him, but he notices it in time to quickly pull his axe from his clothes to defend himself. The thrown weapon spins several times and its trajectory is cut short. Then, Delphine appears, greeting him by saying it has been a while and calling him the Axe Prince. Ian warns that was very dangerous, but the girl replies he is being dramatic. Delphine comments that Ian was perfectly capable of dodging the attack and claims she just wanted to say hello. Then, she turns to Celia, taking an authoritative stance to command the girl to give up and step aside, just like she always did. Ian finds it outrageous that the family successor is demanding her younger sister give up on her goals. Faced with the intimidation, Elsie steps in angrily, asking if Delphine has lost her mind and declaring that their group is going to win the festival. Smugly, Delphine replies she is just talking to her sister. Elsie starts shouting a series of obvious facts so loudly that it hurts Ian's ears, making the boy feel calmer, watching his allies' sudden outburst instead of arguing. Right after, Delphine demands that outsiders stay out of it, turning her sarcastic attention back to Celia. Memories of childhood flood Celia's mind. She remembers the times her sister threatened her with their mother's fate if she wasn't useful to the family. The girl gets upset recalling her defeats, until Ian calls her name. He tells her she's not a quiet child anymore. He reassures her that she doesn't need to feel intimidated in this competition, encouraging Celia to apologize to her sister and warn her that this time she won't give up. Delphine reacts with scorn, saying she's glad to hear that and challenging the girl to bring it on. Delphine's group starts to leave, but Ian calls out to her and throws the dagger back with force, warning her that she forgot her weapon. A boy steps in front of Delphine to defend her and deflects the blade toward Ian, who catches it in the air without any trouble. When Ian asks if she doesn't want her item back, Delphine replies that he can keep the dagger as a reward for surviving the surprise attack. Ian decides to keep the weapon and gets praised by the stranger, who introduces himself as Olmar, the Twin Axe, a fourth-year mercenary interested in him as a fellow fighter. Olmar grabs his axes and warns Ian that he'll show him a bit of his skills, starting to juggle the weapons right after. Ian doesn't understand the point of it and gets annoyed. During the display, Ian draws his own axe and attacks the mercenary without hesitation. The weapon clashes with Olmar's, who is caught off guard and retreats quickly, leaving one of his axes spinning in the air. Olmar comments that it's reckless to swing a weapon at someone outside of battle. Ian replies that he was also just showing his skills. A girl from the group asks Olmar why he's so impressed with Ian, but the mercenary answers that he just wanted to show off. A guy named Furman appears, warning everyone that it's time to go. Before leaving, Olmar invites Ian to join a circus, leaving him confused as the group walks away. Delphine warns them that they'll meet in the forest. Celine asks if they just came to pick a fight. but Ian replies that he doesn't know what goes on in Delphine's head. Before the competition starts, the host explains the rules of the hunting festival. The teams have until 8 at night to capture a beast for the judges' evaluation, and everyone must gather at the forest entrance. For Ian, the important thing is to defeat the horned monster, to get rid of the annoying letters and win the event. 3 hours after the start, Ian's group walks around looking for prey. Elsie loses her patience, wanting to capture something soon so they don't lose their chance at victory. Celine agrees, pointing out they've only found small magic beasts, and asks what they should do to avoid disqualification. Ian replies that he's aware of that and wonders why the letter didn't mention the monster's location. Celia asks everyone to wait a moment, as she can't sense any presence around them. Celine notices the forest is too quiet, making Ian remember the situation with the magic wolf. Elsie points ahead, sensing intense magic in that direction that must belong to a high-ranking magic beast. Trusting his ally's judgment, Ian thinks it's probably the horned monster he's looking for. The atmosphere changes, and the group starts walking close together to cover all sides, keeping their guard up. They reach a field full of slaughtered beasts, and Celia points out that even the magic beasts were defeated there, wondering what happened. Walking among the corpses, Ian assesses the situation, which looks identical to what happened to Emma before. He thought the first monster disemboweled its victims to show off power, but it seems to be more complicated than that. A giant, one-horned magic beast, one of the parents of the wolf they defeated before, stands in front of them. The monster was doing the same thing as its cub until it notices the group and lets out a roar, getting ready for battle. Ian warns everyone to prepare for a tough fight, and the monster leaps, landing right in front of the 4 youngsters. Ian orders them to do what they practiced and asks Elsie to use her support magic. She buffs the party and casts a shield on everyone. They keep their guard up to read the beast's attack patterns. Since there aren't many fallen trees around, they figure the enemy has an unusual movement skill. With that in mind, they decide to act only when there is a clear opening, and Ian lunges at the target. He tells Elsie that the monster's weakness is its horns. She wonders how he knows this, but decides to trust him since there's no time for explanations. Meanwhile, Celia charges with her sword for a horizontal slash, but her blade just grazes the beast's snout. It's unclear whether the creature dodged or if she attacked too early. The massive monster stands on its hind legs before the group and immediately swipes at Celia's head, but she ducks to dodge. She thinks she can keep up the pace, but suddenly sees the enemy's giant paw right above her, about to crush her. Celine tells her ally not to back down and uses her sword to parry the monster's paw, clearing the way for Celia. From this close range, Celia fires an explosive magic spell, shooting a beam of light from her sword straight at the enemy. However, the wolf dodges the attack, bending its own body in an almost impossible way. The beast's head stretches away from its body, and with its jaws wide open, it switches its target to Celine. Ian realizes this is how the animal moves so freely through the forest and runs to help, yelling at his ally to get out of the way. He throws his sword, which strikes the creature's head and saves the girl. The monster then stretches its body back to reposition itself. The beast charges again at Ian's position, and he leaps to avoid the blow. Reading the enemy's movements is impossible, and acting as the team's sole defense is proving to be extremely difficult. Celia asks what they should do, and Ian tells them to rely on Elsie's magic, as his only goal is to draw the creature's attention so she can deal damage. Spotting another charge, Ian shoves Celine aside, saving them both from getting hit as a massive explosion rips through the forest. Someone asks if Ian is okay, since he ends up sitting on the ground, seemingly hurt. He warns everyone to watch out for the wild monster's sudden rushes. Elsie says she'll cast the shield again, and Ian gives the order to attack with everything they've got. The giant beast tries to strike all 4 of them at once. Celia manages to cut its body, drawing the wolf's attention, and it immediately turns with open jaws to devour her. Next, Celine gets hit hard and slammed to the ground, letting out a painful shriek. Ian screams in worry for his companion, but the creature is already turning its eyes back to him. Just then, Elsie calls out that her magic is ready and asks them to keep the beast pinned in one spot. Celia and Ian trade a quick nod, and as they charge, Celia asks Ian for cover. The impact of Celia's sword against the monster's head is massive, blowing her backward. Taking advantage of the opening, Ian closes in from the side, raises his sword, and drives it straight into the enemy's snout. The blow is highly effective, and the wolf seems pinned to the spot by the blade. Panicking, Ian yells for Elsie to aim at the creature's horns to finish it off. She gets it, and warns them that she's releasing the spell, telling them to back away. Massive power begins to surge around her, and the attack blasts the target dead on. Ian is impressed by Elsie's magic power, believing not even that monster would walk away unscathed. However, things won't be that easy. When the dust settles, the The magic beast is still standing, seemingly uninjured, leaving Elsie worried about her own mana reserves. Desperate, she warns that the monster has lightning resistance, which is terrible news for Ian. The situation is annoying, because that's the only magic element Elsie can use. With no options left but to buy time, the young man analyzes the monster and spots a small opening between its body and horn. Determined, he tells the girl to cast her magic one more time, but she complains, asking if he didn't hear her about the creature's resistance. Elsie tries to protest again, but Ian shows his axe and points at the wolf, which startles her at first. He warns that they don't have time to argue, but something worse suddenly happens. The beast opens its mouth and starts forming a lightning ball inside, revealing it can also use magic. Ian falls into complete despair as he witnesses the scene. An explosion follows, causing massive damage to the forest. There was a letter whose 10th part mentioned a possible ambush after defeating the beast, something they still need to see. Right after, Ian screams for Elsie to run, as she's frozen in place and will take the full hit if she doesn't move. Celia leaps and manages to push Elsie away just as the lightning magic shoots from the beast's mouth. Next, Celine appears in front of them to attack, but she gets flung away once more and lets out a groan of pain. Ian runs toward the monster and tries to draw its attention, since the creature's target is Celine. Preparing his strike, he shouts for the monster to face him. The wolf's head whips around to face Ian, and the two begin a fast, intense fight. The young man notices that the monster's lightning skill is probably on cooldown. He uses everything he has to distract the beast, as they need to buy time until Elsie can use her magic again. The wolf grows angrier, showing signs that it's about to use its power again. Ian notices the move, but he has no time to dodge and gets blasted by the lightning, flying backward. He tries to use his sword to stand up, but realizes he sprained his ankle. The wolf takes the chance and charges with everything to crush him into the ground. The girls rush in to stop the attack, leaving it unclear if this is the end for Ian. Celia uses her secret technique, creating 3 illusionary swords that strike the monster in 3 different spots. The beast shifts its own body to dodge the attacks, which ends up saving Ian's life. The young man notices the wolf's dodging ability, seeing that the girl's technique didn't cause any real damage. Celia asks what they should do, and Ian asks about Celine, who is fine but seems unable to move. Suddenly, Elsie screams that her magic is ready. Ian asks Celia to hold off the monster's attack just once, and she agrees, asking what the plan is. The young man replies that he has a strategy and asks for her trust. Understanding the situation, Celia raises her sword to endure the oncoming clash. The magic beast charges and the girl does the same, creating a massive impact as they collide. Celia's feet slide backward, but she keeps holding the creature back with immense effort. Finally, she swings her sword and forces the wolf's head upward. At that exact moment, Ian appears above the beast, axe in hand, ready to strike. Noticing the young man's presence, the monster manages to bite his arm. Ian shouts that this is exactly what he expected the creature to do and aims at its snout. With a precise strike, he frees his arm, throws himself up again, and pulls his sword, seizing the chance to deliver his final blow. Using his brute strength, Ian manages to pierce the monster's head right behind its horn. Then, he pushes himself up and leaps away from the beast. The wolf conjures its lightning magic directly at the boy, but Ian warns that the creature was too slow. In the next instant, the lightning magic hits the monster's head full on, causing a massive explosion right in front of Elsie. Ian falls injured to the ground next to the explosion. The beast roars as its size slowly shrinks, looking at the boy from the corner of its eye. He approaches and asks how the creature feels about being completely burned. With the beast defeated on the ground, Ian concludes that even with lightning resistance, it couldn't survive an attack that melted its internal organs. Elsie asks if he was pretending to be defeated. Pulling the sword out of the monster's body, Ian confirms that the named beast is eliminated, which will provide spoils to save Emma. Celia celebrates the victory, a reaction the boy finds very cute. Since Celine also seems fine and only he got hurt, Ian is satisfied with the result and congratulates everyone. Elsie suggests they rest for a bit, but Ian warns that it's not over yet, and anyone nearby could be trouble. He immediately remembers that the letter mentioned this and looks back. In the next instant, Olmar appears in front of Celine and strikes her shoulder with an axe. Ian shouts for his friend, but quickly has to deflect a dagger flying in his direction. Furman appears right in front of Ian, grabs his arm and slams him to the ground. Someone approaches, saying the situation is a pity, and orders everyone not to move. A blue-haired girl holds Elsie hostage, Olmar keeps Celine pinned down, and Furman holds Ian. Delphine appears before Celia, commenting that the group would have won the festival if they brought the beast back, but that's not going to happen anymore. Celia's sister asks if she plans to challenge her, since her 3 companions are immobilized. Gripping her sword tightly, the girl replies that she won't back down anymore. Hearing the answer, Delphine finds the situation quite amusing. In the next instant, 3 sword strikes are unleashed against the younger Yurdina. She manages to defend against the advance, but Delphine kicks Celia in the stomach, knocking her back. The older sister claims the girl doesn't have the strength to defeat her yet. Standing up with difficulty, Celia agrees, but warns that she won't just stand by and watch what they're doing to her friends. Her aura intensifies as she declares she's no longer that scared child from the past. Delphine gets excited by her sister's growth, and the clash begins with Celia leaping into the attack. Both pass by each other, leaving only the trail of the golden lion technique. With her face scratched, Delphine warns that she won't expel the younger sister from the family as long as she remains the leader, revealing that Celia was completely defeated in the duel. Seeing the girl fall, Ian shouts and asks if Delphine didn't go too far. Fermine tells him to shut up, or his wounds will reopen, while Delphine comments that her ally should have knocked Ian out right away. Ian begins to slip back into his psychopath mode in the face of that injustice. Standing next to the defeated magic beast, the girl claims it's the group's own fault for letting their guard down and turns to lecture the boy. Ian asks how she found them, and Delphine replies she put tracking magic on the dagger she gave him, which worked better than expected. The boy starts blaming himself for his companions getting knocked out, seeing Elsie, Celine, and Celia injured. Frustrated for accepting the weapon, he calls himself an idiot and starts losing consciousness. Delphine notices him passing out and mocks him. Ian wonders what will happen now and thinks Emma will die. He imagines Celia won't tolerate being mistreated by her family and will abandon them. And after all that, when a certain person appears, the world will end for everyone. Friends, family, and everyone he loves will die, and his thoughts drift to the moment of having to carry someone's body at the end of the world. He reflects that everything would be different if he had the potion made by Emma, or if Celia could get stronger after a victory. He concludes he needs to open his eyes so he doesn't lose those who are important. Meanwhile, Delphine considers she really overdid it a bit, but thinks that in the end, it is about survival of the fittest. Suddenly, someone screams behind her and an axe flies past her head. The weapon passes very close to Delphine and hits the magical beast's head directly. Fermine stays on the ground with his face covered by his hands, as his broken nose won't stop bleeding, which will keep him still for a while to prevent the blood from entering his nasal passages. Ian gets up and after wiping the blood from his own mouth, takes his sword and challenges Delphine to a fight. The heiress finally remembers the axe she didn't notice approaching and wonders how that happened. Despite his aching body and spinning head, Ian feels plenty of energy to face her. Next, Olmar approaches and threatens to make Ian pay for hurting Firmin. At the same moment, Ian throws his sword at his opponent's feet, who dodges at the last second. Before Olmar can react, Ian pulls him by the arm, throws him off balance, and slams him to the ground hard using a judo move. Delphine watches the scene, surprised by the reaction. With Olmar pinned down, Ian grabs the weapon from the ground and stabs the opponent's shoulder without hesitation, repeating what was done to Celine. The blue-haired girl gets scared and starts casting her spells, firing several ice projectiles at Ian. With better reflexes, he dodges the attacks and throws the spinning sword at her. The mage manages to dodge to the side, but the weapon changes trajectory and hits her heel. Delphine is shocked to witness the technique. Fallen, the girl screams in despair for Ian not to approach with the axe, but he knocks her out with a single blow, stating she was too noisy. Delphine breaks the silence and asks how he used that technique with the sword, pointing out it was a secret that normal people couldn't learn. Ignoring the demand, Ian says he doesn't care about that and just tells her to fight. The 11th part of the letter mentions the moment the girl started falling in love with him. Delphine insists on an answer, noting that the move against Olmar was from the Holy Kingdom and the one used against Aisha belonged to the Sword Circle. Internally, Ian recalls the teachings of Celia, who used the surrounding environment to explain the concept that all movement begins in stillness and both become one. Ian wonders why he had this memory and tries to explain to Delphine that she was wrong. She accuses him of learning a technique illegitimately, draws her sword, and warns she will make him answer by force. Then, the girl charges at him with her aura activated. Ian was in his normal mode and was no match for her since he was missing a hand, and the sword slash grazes his neck. Delphine shouts that he won't win if he just keeps running, the same thing Teen said before. With a jump, Ian backs away and throws his sword at her. Delphine, more focused than that night, warns his intentions were obvious. He advances while the sword circles around her, and she starts using her technique, saying multiple paths are drawn like the claws of a lion. Several beams of magic are conjured around Delphine, throwing Ian back. She asks if the boy still thinks he can defeat her after seeing that. Seeming to have assumed his other personality, he replies it was nothing and that he will defeat her soon. The two watch each other standing still for a moment, and Delphine finds it strange he managed to dodge her golden lion technique, something that should be impossible. The girl notes he is highly motivated for someone who shouldn't be her match. She tells him she wants to mess with him even more and lunges forward. Ian dodges every strike with ease, keeping his distance, while more fake strikes of the golden lion technique conjure without hitting anything. His perception and speed annoy her since they are evenly matched, until she corners him near a tree and claims he can't dodge forever. This makes him remember he heard that line more than once. Ian recalls Leto telling him to use topology in his fights, getting an insight that he finally understood the concept of the movement of stillness, and stands up to continue the fight. He throws his axe at Delphine, who deflects it with her sword. Ian charges unarmed and she asks if he was so desperate to give up his only weapon. The truth is, he wasn't desperate and didn't even have the talent to bend his body like the magical beast, but he decides to test something else by passing through the golden lion technique unarmed. He needed to bend something other than his body, and then space itself bends. Delphine sees what he is doing, noticing the boy was inside the technique and right in front of her. She thinks everything is still fine because he is unarmed, but Ian puts her own dagger against her neck and announces his victory, making the girl say she has no choice but to admit it. Delphine declares her defeat and comments it is unbelievable to lose for the first time. She was about to withdraw, but realizes Ian stabbed her with the dagger. He warns her that this was just the beginning, and reminds her that in this world only the fittest survive. With her arm useless, the girl could no longer hold her sword. Delphine questions his intentions, claiming that attacking someone who surrendered was shameful. Right after, Ian strikes her other arm and tells her he doesn't care, because there was still one thing to settle. He demands she apologize for hurting Celia. Delphine refuses at first, but Ian grabs his axe and threatens to end her life if she doesn't obey, promising to let her go if she agrees. The girl realizes the threat is real and that her defeat in combat would be certain due to her injuries. After asking if she would have to beg for her life, she hears Ian reply that it is a matter of survival. With no other choice, Delphine apologizes to the group for the attack and the robbery attempt, and also confesses to Celia that she spread the rumors about her mother. When she asks Ian if that is enough, she sees his axe still raised. He clarifies he only wanted to make sure that if the Yerdina family tried to cause him trouble in the future, he would turn her into food for magical beasts. Delphine confirms she understood the message. Next, a farewell letter states that the person will dream of Ian. With the end of the festival, it is time to announce this year's winners. The students expected Delphine's victory, but the news of her team's evacuation raises doubts about who would win. The announcer declares that none of the 500 students came close to the achievement of the true champions, who survived a giant danger. The creature's body is displayed while the man thanks them for neutralizing the threat and announces the name of Elsia Ranella from the 4th year Magic Division. The names of Celine Haster and Celia Yerdina are also announced. Then, the Saint recalls recommending that the team representative give up, but Ian receives his official announcement. As a reward, the 4 win a bottle of dragon blood, causing awe and envy in the crowd. They would also have the right to the beast's body, which would make good money, but Ian decides to talk to the group to use the monster as an offering to save Emma. Elsie explains her family is rich and doesn't need the money, while Celia and Celine agree to leave everything to the boy, considering the dragon blood to be enough. After confirming they are sure, Ian calls the Saint to the spot and asks if the offering would be enough to cure his friend, leaving the crowd shocked. Under the celebration fireworks, the woman says God would bless him for his good deeds, making Ian happy. With the end of the festival, the Saint explains that Emma's treatment would start at the end of the next day, but warns that Ian's arm suffered near permanent damage. The boy states his reflexes got worse but accepts the situation, since he managed to save his friend and avoided the guilt of tragedy. Emotional and somewhat envious of his worry, the woman takes his arm and asks for a secret. She uses a miraculous orb to heal him, which leaves Ian desperate over the use of such a precious item, but the Saint just smiles and repeats it is a secret, making him agree he saw nothing. Then she tells him to go to the celebration party and watches him leave. During the team's celebration, Ian comments he still hasn't gotten used to his new group. He questions what his friend Leto, already drunk, was doing at the winner's table, but the boy refuses to leave because he is part of Ian's circle, an argument that ends up being accepted. Soon after, Celia approaches and screams for a private talk with the boy. They walk away under Celine's distant gaze. Ian asks if she was feeling better with the victory, but Celia replies she did nothing, and that the merit for defeating Delphine was all his. Ian states she is no longer weak, and Celia asks if her nightmares will stop now. Ian doesn't know the answer, but he says Celia will never drown in anxiety again. The girl blushes as she thinks about him, and gathering her courage, claims she has something to say. Ian gets nervous, wondering if a romance event is starting, but Celia just shouts her thanks for all his help. Frustrated that it's not a confession, he concludes this is just her way. Since they became friends in less than a month, Ian already feels close to her. During her thanks, he puts a necklace around Celia's neck. explaining he bought it because it reminded him of her. The pendant, which says, "First Love," is shaped like a sepia flower, made to last forever. Embarrassed, Ian says the gift might make her less anxious, and the girl smiles and says she loves it, while Celine listens to the whole conversation from her hiding spot, feeling frustrated. Back at the party, Leto asks if Ian and Celia are dating, but Ian denies it. His friend also notices how close the Saint is, asking if she likes him, which makes Ian curse at Leto and tell him to stop joking. Leto says he's serious and warns that every girl in the academy will fall in love if Ian keeps acting like that. Calling his friend stupid, Ian says goodbye and goes to his room. In his bed, he concludes that only Celia could be the sepia, and wonders if they will ever become lovers. Drunk and tired, Ian falls asleep, thinking about how he should treat her from now on. In his dreams, he sees himself entering a tent in a wasteland, where a woman welcomes him. Ian says it's an honor to meet her again, and asks about the situation on the Eastern Front. The woman explains they're still at their limit, running low on supplies, and enemy forces keep growing. Ian reports that the other fronts are also doing badly, but he's doing what he can. Curious, he looks in the direction she points, revealing a ruined area with destroyed trees and a trail of blood. She warns that Delphirum is coming, and Ian asks what that is as they can't take anymore. At that moment, the boy wakes up startled. He's starting to get used to having this same dream. Thinking he might have had too much to drink, Ian goes to the table to get some water. As he grabs the bottle to cure his hangover, something catches his eye. A new letter from the future is on his table. On top of that, the first letter had a final note revealing that Sepia was jealous of a cat that might attract Ian's attention in the royal capital. Now he has to see what he will face from here on, and if an even bigger threat will appear. To see the continuation, leave a request for part 2 in the comments, and thanks for the fish. As he reads the letter, Yam wonders if another incident is going to happen, and finds out that after the hunting festival there will be a field mission at an orphanage. He notices the name of a woman called Lucia, wondering what kind of bizarre future awaits him. Then he realizes the calendar turned by itself, which means he lost his memory again. The boy also concludes his alter ego drank the dragon blood from the festival because he finds the empty vial and feels his mana is much stronger, also guessing that Emma might have finally woken up. After that, he goes to see the Saint. On the way, Yam notices nobody looks at him strangely, concluding nothing bizarre happened this time. But right after, the protagonist is attacked, tries to defend himself, and barely misses being seriously hit. The Saint's bodyguard says he's back to being his usual weak self, making Yam realize that unfortunately, something went wrong. A while later, he manages to speak with the Saint, who doesn't look happy to see him. The protagonist notices recent signs of a struggle all over the visiting room. The Saint asks if Yam doesn't remember what happened last week, and he claims he's telling the truth about his memory loss, but his words aren't enough to convince her. She then asks if she should just ignore what he forgot and hand over the confidential information. With no idea what she's talking about, Yam watches the Saint present the list he requested about struggling orphanages. He doesn't remember making the request, but he knows the letter mentioned the orphanages, so he simply replies that he doesn't know what he plans to do with the information. The Saint concludes he's hiding what he knows and claims her kindness was met with contempt. She says she jumped to conclusions about the boy, making Yam wonder what he did wrong for the Saint to act this way. Urin says it seems someone possessed Yam since his eyes looked different, and the fact that he lost his memory would explain the situation. The protagonist asks what exactly he did, and Urin asks if he doesn't remember hitting her shoulder. When he denies it, the bodyguard recounts the previous events, explaining that before arriving at the scene, the mood was already strange. On that occasion, the Saint apologized for not meeting him alone and claimed she needed her bodyguard nearby, at which point Yam asked to gather information on orphanages going through hard times, despite receiving support from the Holy Nation. The Saint said she couldn't provide confidential information. Then Yam asked how Archbishop Aindel was doing and claimed to know that unknown forces were working to overthrow him, suggesting he'd turn a blind eye to this in exchange for the requested information. Urin knew the Saint was using the Archbishop's corruption to try to remove him from power and concluded that if this information leaked, the whole plan would go down the drain. Urin decided to act quickly, but Yam realized what was about to happen and challenged the bodyguard to a fight. She attacked first, but the boy dodged with speed, attacked from behind, and almost struck her with an axe when the opponent left an opening in her defense. The Saint helped her bodyguard with an energy buff, making Urin more agile and confident in her victory. However, she was shocked by her opponent's strength right after when she was slammed in the shoulder, wondering how that was possible. Urin got the worst of the fight and was incapacitated after her shoulder was injured. Next, the Saint went for a close combat attack, but Yam managed to dodge with ease. Urin noticed he didn't show surprise when he saw the Saint use the Holy Nation's jujutsu, concluding the boy even knew about that. Right after, Yam managed to pin the woman down and used the holy technique Moon Reversal to slam her to the ground. At this, The bodyguard claimed Yam wouldn't get away with doing that to the saint, but the boy replied she should shut her mouth if she wanted to keep the woman alive. The saint then questioned who was actually in front of her, and the protagonist simply replied he was Yam Purkis. Then Yurin pointed out that the boy was using a secret technique of the Holy Nation, which outsiders don't learn easily. The saint agreed, claiming she had enough political power to eliminate most nobles, and demanded Yam be honest. In turn, Yam used his power and surprised the saint with the dragon script. Yurin questioned if he was linked to the imperial family, because only then could he use that ability. The boy declared the situation could have been simpler if she had handed over the information when requested, but the woman decided to complicate things. The saint said she wouldn't help someone who attacked her and injured her bodyguard, but Yam claimed she had no choice and promised to burn the entire place down with her inside if she didn't cooperate. In that case, the saint said she'd help if he didn't interfere in matters involving the archbishop, and so the two made a deal. With that, Yam went to Yurin and took his axe. Before leaving, he warned the saint not to make the situation even more humiliating, saying she should just obey without complaining. Back in the present, the protagonist gets extremely embarrassed hearing this story. Yurin says the Yam in front of her is very different from the one who attacked her, believing he was possessed and therefore holding no grudge against the real Yam. With that, the bodyguard leaves without providing information about Emma, making the protagonist think he'll have to leave that for later and focus on the orphanage mission. First, he thinks it's best to check the mission board, thinking everyone is being careful with their choices to avoid failures. Since he doesn't care much about grades, he doesn't mind taking tasks nobody wants, but this time he needs a mission located in an orphanage in the east. Upon finding the document, Yam notes the difficulty is low, even though the letter mentions ambushes and monster nests. He'd like to use the same team from the festival, but students from different years can't team up for field tasks, leaving him undecided on who to take. Suddenly, in the middle of the crowd, someone grabs his arm. The protagonist sees it is his friend Leto and asks why he is being dragged away. Then, Leto pins him against the wall, looks deep into his eyes and realizes he is facing the real Yam. The protagonist asks if there is another Yam besides him. Leto says yes, and concludes that his friend loses his memories when he gets possessed. Yam thinks that Yurin said the same thing, and asks what happened for his friend to say that. Leto then tells him that he talked to the other Yam from the future, who took over when the present Yam was asleep. In a flashback, the protagonist insisted he was Yam Purkis, but Leto pressed him, stating he was not the friend he knew. The young man explained he was the future Yam, and correctly answered questions only the real one would know, like the age Celine stopped wetting the bed. Leto realized he was not lying and started to believe in time travel, wondering how that was possible. Angry, he tried to find out the traveler's plans and understood how the swap of consciousness worked. When Leto tried to fight the intruder, the future Yam quickly pinned him down. He warned Leto that he would not have control of the body for long. The man explained he needed to do something important without interruptions, then let Leto go and asked him not to stand in his way. Not wanting to let anyone use his friend's body freely, Leto asked why he traveled back in time. The future Yam replied that he had failed, and it was his duty to return and fix his mistakes. Back in the present, the protagonist listens to all of this. Leto shares a theory about the timelines. He compares the traveler's origin to a massive fire. He explains that by preventing the disaster, the present Yam would live in peace, while the intruder would return to his own burning reality. This way, both would share the past, but they would have different futures. However, the protagonist points out that the future described in the letter was peaceful. Leto explains that the message could have come from a timeline that was already changed. As Yam gets confused about the existence of 3 different realities, Leto adds that the dark man went to the forest after their meeting and vanished. The protagonist asks if it was the same forest where Emma was, and Leto confirms it, mentioning that the girl had already been discharged. Sometime later, Yam goes straight to meet the young girl and finally finds her awake. During their chat, he apologizes for not visiting sooner, but Emma reveals they had already met after her recovery. She says that during their previous meeting, Yam made a weird request, asking her to thank him only during their next encounter. Emma then thanks him for everything and offers her services as the Purkis house alchemist to pay him back. The protagonist refuses, saying his only wish is for her to live a normal life, make medicine, save money for the academy, and help her father. Emma starts to laugh and warns him that his pure heart might let some girl take advantage of him. After agreeing to follow his advice, she asks if he needs any medicine. Yam asks if it is possible to send a soul through space-time, just like they previously discussed sending a letter to the future. Emma answers that if that is actually possible, she can think of 2 explanations, either the extinction of humanity or the destruction of Delphirum. Emma says that if the world were about to end, the divine god Ars would lose his power, and if Delphirum disappeared, others could use that ability. Yam concludes that his future self indeed came from a destroyed world. Then, Emma asks to leave this topic for another time because she has something to give him. The young man says he does not need more potions, but she argues he should always carry some just in case. Emma says that a few days ago, Delphirum was found wounded in the southern forest. She would have died if she had not been found in time, and she recovered thanks to the potions. The girl mentions she tried to visit her, but not even the closest assistants are allowed to get near. With this, the protagonist decides to find out more about the situation. He says goodbye after restocking his medicine, wondering if this has something to do with his future self. The next day, Yam goes to see Delphirum. He cannot see her right away, but the situation changes after he sends a single letter. The young woman receives a note warning her that if she does not want to get hurt again, she must meet with Yam Purkis. He figures his future self did this and tries to find out something from her. However, Delphirum states she is only in this state because of him and asks if he is there to mock her. The protagonist confirms it was his future self who attacked her. Even though he is not directly responsible, he still feels guilty and asks if she is in pain. Delphirum is confused by the question. Yam thinks that even if she is hurt, she shouldn't act like a tragic heroine. He remembers that Yerdina cries just talking about their mother, but Delphirum used that against her own sister and bullied her without even looking at her tears. He says she shouldn't act like a victim just because she got beaten up a little. Delphirum begs him not to attack her again, believing the boy is there to punish her. Instead, Yam hands her a document and asks if she is free for a field mission. The young woman confirms, not understanding why. Yam says he is going to help her fix her controversial personality through volunteer work, giving her a week to recover before they leave. After walking out, the protagonist concludes that he didn't learn much about the future, but he secured the best swordswoman as an ally. A week later, he prepares to leave and goes to a travel portal for the main centers of the continent. The destination is Guilford Orphanage, which is far from any city, requiring him to rent horses and travel for a day and a half. He called Elsie Ranella to help, but since she and Delphirum have other business to settle first, they will arrive at the destination later. Yam thinks traveling alone is the price for recruiting powerful allies, but before crossing the portal, he is approached by the saint who asks what he is doing there. The protagonist notices she still holds a grudge when the girl claims that his lack of companions means he is reaping what he sowed. He explains that his allies will arrive later and points out that the saint only has one ally, suggesting her personality isn't the best either. The saint snaps back, saying she can't wander around with strangers and that she is doing volunteer work instead of a mission. Yurin notices the tension between the two and asks where Yam is going. The protagonist answers that his mission is at Guilford Orphanage, and Yurin mentions they are going to the same place, suggesting they keep each other company. The saint doesn't like the idea, but she accepts if it is the will of the celestial god Ars. Yam asks what that means, and the young woman replies that, as a thug, he must not know divine teachings, but her duty is to obey without question. The protagonist notices that his future self said the exact same thing to the saint, figuring the choice of words is no coincidence. He recalls that at first he thought it was all a prank, but Emma's ambush and the festival happened exactly as predicted, helping him avoid the worst. Yam knows the letters come from the future, and that his duty is to stop the world from ending. So he decides to carry out the mission and keep obeying the messages to prevent the worst from happening. Sometime later, Yam finds himself fallen and injured, only knowing he was fighting a creature and thinking he had barely escaped. However, the monster returns right after, surprising the protagonist, who thought the clash was already over. Since his only choice is to keep fighting, he uses all his strength to attack. Yam thinks he can't lose this fight and believes he already knows how this will end, because the letter predicted everything. A few days ago, Yam arrived at the orphanage. Guilford, the director, thanked him for coming from so far and offered tea to the visitors, saying he was surprised to receive not only a young scholar but also a saint. Justifying her presence, the saint explains there is no place unreachable by the grace of the celestial god. Then, she claims that Yam, unlike her, is violent and arrogant, questioning what motivated him to accept the mission. Before answering, Yam asks if the mission request is just a normal magical beast subjugation. Guilford explains that months ago, he took a sleepless child for a walk in the garden and was ambushed by a huge monkey-like creature, which carried the child away. Since that night, the monster returns monthly to kidnap another orphan. The director warns that the creature's next visit is near and asks for help, leading the saint to guarantee she will solve the problem, though she requests more information about the target. After leaving the room, the saint asks if Yam noticed the same thing she did, and he confirms that the creature is no ordinary magical beast. Since it attacks precisely every month, focuses on a single target, and doesn't kill the prey beforehand, it is a superior monster with high cognitive ability. Yam suggests asking the Holy Kingdom for support because it is a difficult task for a few people, but the saint warns she couldn't get help for something so trivial without proof of a greater threat. Hearing this, the protagonist thinks that Delphiram and Elsie will show up too, and the group should be able to handle it. As soon as they arrive, Elsie refuses to help and Delphiram backs down too, claiming there is no reason to use her skills on a trivial matter. Using persuasion, Yam states they must help for the good of the kingdom, ordering a rotation to guard the surroundings since they can't do much besides wait for the attack. He tells the saint to protect the children, but asks what is wrong when he notices her reaction. The saint claims that Yam only got obedience by being aggressive and expresses her contempt, making the protagonist think that she complains about everything and that he only wants to finish the mission efficiently. While the others are at the orphanage, Yam keeps watch outside. Since 3 days have passed without any incidents, he expects an attack at any moment and decides to switch shifts. He goes inside the building to look for Elsie, who hasn't shown up yet. Inside, he finds out the girl is struggling to handle the kids, relying on urine to keep from chasing them all over the place. Yam takes her outside and advises her to have patience, but Elsie says he knows nothing about her, rejecting his lectures and turning down his help on patrol. The protagonist warns the girl to be careful in dark areas and to always use a flashlight. Elsie claims she knows what she's doing, right after Yam sees the creature approaching. On top of that, the monster is about to attack Elsie. Yam tries to save the girl but can't reach her in time when he attacks, as the monster manages to grab Elsie. The creature tries to carry her away, and the protagonist goes after it, caught off guard by the enemy's incredible speed. Yam thinks he can't panic now, and concentrates to use his senses and locate his ally. With this, he realizes the creature took the girl deep into the forest, but he notices she was dropped along the way, wondering what exactly the monster is trying to do. Elsie wakes up in the middle of the forest and realizes she blacked out. She thinks horrible memories of a time she'd rather forget distracted her, wanting to find the monster that captured her to make it pay for what it did. However, she realizes there are several monsters there and gathers her magic power to prepare for the attack. Before getting hit, Elsie tries to use a shield, but she ends up grabbed by one of the creatures. She uses a power to blast the enemy back and protects herself inside the shield with a lightning field, striking the monsters head on. The shield eventually shatters and she goes for a more direct attack, noticing the enemies don't stay down for long, which means they have high resistance against magic. Right after, one of the creatures tries to ambush the girl, but Yam appears and uses his sword to block the blow. They start running, and Elsie asks if they shouldn't fight instead of running away. Yam explains that the monsters have the advantage in the forest because they outnumber them, meaning they can easily surround their prey. He also says the smaller creatures don't leave the woods, so outside they would only have to deal with the larger monster. Getting close to the exit, the protagonist spots the larger creature and notices it wants to capture Elsie again, managing to protect his ally this time. However, Yam realizes the enemy is too fast for its size and that dealing with it won't be easy, telling Elsie to get help while he distracts it. The monster manages to disarm the protagonist with a strike, and Yam realizes the creature can also use aura. He tries to use his axe, but ends up disarmed again by the monster's cleverness. Elsie warns that she's going to signal the others, making herself a target in the process. She manages to send a bright lightning bolt just in time, almost getting hit during the action. The girl only escapes because Yam steps in front and takes the hit for her. Even after getting slammed, the protagonist tells the creature to run while it can because his friends are coming after it, making the monster retreat upon hearing this. Yam asks if Elsie is hurt, and she says no, telling him to worry about himself. With that, the protagonist loses his strength and collapses to the ground. Elsie tries to wake him up, completely lost on what to do. Sometime later, the protagonist has another strange dream in which he sees the saint drinking and remarks that this is something new. She replies that she started recently, as she can't handle everything sober. Yam says that now she understands how Sophia feels, but the saint warns that he shouldn't talk about other women on an occasion like this. The saint mentions that she used to be proud of her power because it was a rare gift that saved people without hurting anyone, but now there's nothing she can do with her abilities. Yam tells her not to worry because all fronts are a mess and it was the Holy Kingdom's decision to abandon the city. She concludes that this probably happened due to the death of the saint, something that would have been avoided if she had resolved the orphanage issue, leaving them now with nothing to do but obey without resisting. Next, Yam wakes up and realizes he had another one of his dreams of the future, at which point the saint notices he is finally awake. She explains that everyone rushed to the forest when they heard Elsie's thunder and that the young man barely survived. The saint reports that the director set up a room, but it was hard work treating a severe wound because of the demonic energy that still needs to be cleared. The protagonist regrets causing trouble, though he admits he's lucky to have a saint around, while she dismisses his flattery and asks him to tell her what happened in the forest. Yam explains that the creature that hurt him is a sort of pack leader, since there are several of them scattered across the area. He figures out that the bigger monster did the same thing to the children that it did to Elsie, taking her into the deep woods and leaving her at the mercy of the others. The boy reports that the creature used aura to fight, something the saint knows absolutely nothing about, as she has never heard of monsters with that ability. The protagonist admits he is not sure because everything happened too fast, but he knows there is something much bigger behind the situation. Meanwhile, Elsie sweeps the orphanage, thinking that Yam almost died because of her. A child comes over and lets her know he woke up, making the girl run to his room right away. On the way, she wonders what to say since she feels so guilty. Since she was always looked down on and treated coldly by her family, she believed nobody cared about her and doesn't understand why Yam went so far and risked so much to save her. Then, she enters the room, and the protagonist says he is happy to see she didn't get hurt. Elsie claims he almost died for a stupid reason and shouldn't worry about others, asking why he took such a big risk. Yam answers that he didn't think of anything specific, he just felt he had to save an ally from danger. The girl calls him an idiot and runs out of the room. In her thoughts, she admits she liked what she heard. After the girl leaves without even saying thank you, Yam tells the saint that the important thing is that Elsie is fine and asks if they can call for reinforcements now that the situation has changed. She explains she would need proof, but the Holy Cavalry isn't their only option, as she told some people about his injuries and they should arrive any minute. Right after that, the protagonist's friends show up and say they couldn't just sit around after hearing what happened. The saint says she will leave them to talk alone, and Yurdina mentions how worried she was when she found out about the attack. The protagonist apologizes and says he is glad to have friends he can count on since he will need their help. He calculates that, besides the saint and her bodyguard, he has 2 swordswomen from the Yurdina family, a long-range support mage, and an investigation expert. With this team, Yam believes he can uncover the truth behind the forest mystery and put an end to the monster once and for all. The girls are against the plan. Yurdina warns that searching the dense forest is dangerous, while Celine and Leto suggest that Yam should go back to the city to recover properly. Sensing their worry, the protagonist states that the matter is urgent, because something worse than the festival might happen if the monster isn't stopped. Knowing Yam's stubbornness when it comes to acting alone despite the risks, the group agrees to help. The group starts searching the forest, but they report finding nothing even after looking deep into the area. Leto asks if the creature might have run away, but Yam explains that the monster is persistent and wouldn't back down just because it's being hunted. Celine points out they have been searching for days with no luck. The protagonist realizes he hasn't joined the search in person yet and wonders if the monster might be waiting for him. The next day, Yam joins the search, admitting to Delphirem that the demonic energy in his body hasn't been fully purified. He explains that the monster failed in its first attack and vanished, so he needs to use himself as bait to lure it out. That is why he asked the mage to come along, believing he can trust her to cover his back. Delphirem thinks about how the same man who defeated her before is now asking for her protection, not understanding what goes on in his head. Right after, Yam finds suspicious tracks, but Delphirem tells him to be quiet before he can warn her. A strange power shows up, revealing several enemies trying to surround him, though the leader doesn't appear. The protagonist defends himself with his senses boosted by the dragon blood, barely escaping enemies that attack from above and try to grab his sword. Delphirem jumps into the fight as well and tells Yam not to let his guard down. Yam says they can cover each other's backs. He figures that having backup and being stronger makes up for his lack of recovery. Using his sword and axe, he cuts down all the monsters coming from every side, using his quick reflexes to make sure none escape. After killing them all and checking that Delphirem is okay, he suggests gathering the bodies for study and selling the rest to help the orphanage. The mage tells him to hurry up, not wanting to stay in this creepy place. Right after, the protagonist notices that one of the creatures survived and is trying to escape. He realizes the monster wasn't just trying to hunt, but was heading somewhere specific. Because of this, Yam wants to find out their real goal as soon as possible. A while later, back at the orphanage, Yurin gathers the collected bodies and asks if Yam really wants to donate all the sales money to the place. The protagonist says yes, explaining that the orphanage has been getting fewer donations since the disappearances started. Hearing this, Yurin says he'll handle the details and asks Yam to watch over the Saintess while he's gone. As soon as the two are alone, the Saintess scolds the protagonist for sneaking out. She says Yam wasn't thinking straight, believing it was a good idea to fight right after getting badly hurt. Saria Yurdina notices them talking and comments that they're getting a bit too close. The The Saintess snaps back that she's just scolding him and tells Yerdina not to jump to conclusions. Sensing the awkward tension, Leto cuts in to share some important news. He reveals that, after analyzing all the data, he concluded that this whole situation doesn't just involve a simple monster, but a demon. Sometime later, Guilford, the orphanage owner, thanks Yam for the donations. The protagonist mentions he heard the old man is a retired magic beast hunter. Guilford replies that those days are long gone, and now he can barely walk right. Still, Yam says he needs the wisdom of an experienced hunter because he believes the creature is acting with high intelligence and protecting something specific, which means a demon is controlling the monsters. Guilford agrees and mentions the legend of a demon living in the forest of the Great Sea of Trees. The Saintess remembers the story, mentions that the creature acts like a vampire, and asks if the old man ever went after the enemy. The orphanage owner explains that the path to the place was brutal, crawling with magic beasts and poisonous plants. The dark energy of the environment took over his companions' minds, making them fight each other until they were all wiped out, leaving him as the sole survivor. Filled with fear and shame, Guilford abandoned the investigation, and now tries to convince Yam to do the same to avoid a tragic end. The protagonist refuses to back down, arguing that Elsie almost lost her life fighting the enemy, and that the orphanage children would be in danger if they did nothing. He says they need to find proof of demon activity to call for reinforcements. Realizing he can't change Yam's mind, Guilford warns them all to be careful. Yam decides to split the search teams to cover more of the forest and find out why the enemy is hiding there. He plans to stay at the orphanage to recover alongside the Saintess and Leto, while the others look for clues to call the Holy Knights. The Saintess warns him that backup would take about 2 weeks to arrive. The protagonist thinks that's way too long, but the Saintess points out how dangerous it is to fight the demon, reminding him that they almost lost 2 team members. Guilford agrees that it's best to wait for backup after finding the proof. Yam accepts the plan, but promises he won't sit idle if he needs to act immediately. Later that night, Yam keeps watch outside, bothered by the demon story and hoping nothing bad happens before the backup arrives. Suddenly, he senses danger approaching and strikes immediately, thinking it's the enemy. But he quickly realizes his target isn't a demon, it's Guilford, who manages to block the strike just in time and tells the young man to calm down. Facing the old hunter, the protagonist wonders what that demonic presence he felt earlier actually was. Yam apologizes for attacking Guilford, explaining he mistook him for a demon. The hunter notices how tense the boy is and jokes that he was almost sent to the afterlife, adding that Yam reminds him of his youth as a mercenary swordsman who thought he was unstoppable alongside his comrades. Though he says those days are in the past, Guilford offers to teach him a counterattack technique against demons. Yam asks if the old man is physically fit enough to train, but Guilford reassures him his leg isn't an issue, since he just dodged a strike. Since it's late, the hunter tells Yam to find him tomorrow, leaving the protagonist sure that Guilford still has a lot to offer, and wondering if that demonic presence was just in his head. The next day, during training, Yam realizes Guilford is much faster than he thought. When asked about his performance, the young man praises the old man's impressive swordsmanship and asks for the name of the move. Guilford explains the technique is called absolute rupture, which consists of moving with everything you have and using the blade to the very end. Yam promises to practice until he masters it, but the saint interrupts the training when she notices he's bleeding from overexertion. Scolding him for never listening to her, she immediately takes him inside the orphanage. Outside, a strange man appears and greets Guilford, who gets startled by his sudden presence. Meanwhile, the saint asks Yam why he's pushing himself so hard. He claims he's worried about the demon attacks on the children, but she counters that she knows him well enough to know he doesn't really care about them. Yam criticizes her harsh attitude for a saint, and she shoots back that she doubts he cares about anyone but himself. Even so, she says she doesn't demand explanations, she just asks him not to make her treatment any harder. After that, Yam concludes the saint still holds a grudge, shattering any illusion that they were starting to understand each other. Next, a little girl approaches the protagonist and asks if he's angry, to which he explains he's just in a bit of pain. The child asks for help tying her hair, but since Yam doesn't know how to do it, he decides to find a friend to help her. On his way, he finds the orphanage director talking to the mysterious man, and Guilford introduces him as Mitram, who has helped manage the place since its foundation. The young man notices the old hunter can barely stand after their training and asks if he's okay. Guilford assures him he is and leaves to tend to important business, while Yam finds Mitram strange, getting the feeling he has seen him somewhere before. Several days pass without any attacks, allowing the protagonist to fully recover, until Urine returns with money and supplies. Meanwhile, Leto gathers data on suspicious locations, leading the team to investigate and find a promising cave. Yam believes it's the enemy's hideout, and Delphirim supports the idea, stating it could be a nest due to the beasts in the surrounding area. The protagonist decides he'll join the next search, telling everyone to get ready to leave at sunrise. Suddenly, screaming breaks out and Yam goes to check, finding the children crying as they reveal a monster appeared and took Lin away. The protagonist is surprised since until then the monster had only appeared at night, but it ended up taking the child in broad daylight. Yam demands to be guided to the cave immediately, while Delphiram asks for time to plan a proper attack. Yam argues that Lin is in danger and might disappear if they don't go right now. The saint warns that leading students to search for an orphan could bring trouble, and Leto advises that acting without a plan could cause more casualties, suggesting a reconnaissance mission at sunset so they don't risk their own lives. Later, the protagonist organizes his potions until Leto brings him a scroll with fire magic, explaining that most beasts fear this element. His friend asks him to use the item wisely and returns safely with Celine. Guilford also urges caution during the search, reminding the young man that he has already gotten into a lot of trouble. He advises that, even if it sounds cruel, the orphan has no family, so Yam shouldn't feel bad about prioritizing the students' lives if things get worse. The protagonist understands the advice but promises to bring the girl back. Yam warns his team that their goal is to find proof of demonic involvement and rescue any victims, but stresses that everyone must prioritize their own lives. Following the tracks, they're ambushed by creatures trying to stop them from reaching the cave. The group fights hard and defeats the enemies. The protagonist assesses that those beasts are just the outer guard, and that the worst might still be waiting inside, deciding to push forward with the raid. Upon entering, Delphiram notices the cave was strategically built. Yam notices the lack of traps and how shallow the place is, concluding that the dweller feels comfortable enough to just wait for them. At the back of the cave, they find a sort of cocoon sprouting something strange, which Yurin identifies through a book as a flesh nest derived from an ancient demonic monster. The protagonist questions what a historical legend is doing in such a desolate place. The saint suggests retreating, stating they already have evidence of a demon's presence and that the girl is probably no longer alive. Yam also thinks it would be best to return with reinforcements, but the flesh from the cocoon starts advancing toward the group. Elsie concludes this is a trap programmed to trigger when the prey tries to escape, which explains the lack of previous defenses. A monster lunges at Yam, who manages to dodge and orders everyone to retreat immediately. When he pierces the flesh creature, it releases an acidic poison that almost hits him. His friends worry, but he insists he's fine and decides to hold off the enemies while the rest of the group escapes. Yam faces the monsters alone and realizes these flesh balls aren't much of a challenge for a legendary enemy, also noting that the other opponents didn't attack. Then, he notices one of the spheres is still moving and discovers Lin trapped inside the monster, begging for help. Yam can't make it in time to save the girl, but he puts an end to her suffering and hopes she rests in peace. Right after, even while awake, memories of his future start to surface. In the memory, an ally tells the future Yam that she found a way to help the people turned into monsters go back to normal. He replies that those people are already dead and can't come back, telling his ally there is no more room for kindness in this world. The girl leaves, saying she will try anyway, and Yam says he hopes she returns alive, despite how hard the mission is. After some time, they meet again with the ally near death, and the young man points out this was the result of her kindness. He notices the girl laughing and asks if she is still happy even though she failed her goal. With no answer, Yam doubts his companion's attitude, but before leaving her, he promises to go after the enemies to eliminate them all with his own hands. Back in the present, Celine asks why Yam hasn't left the cave yet. Then, Elsie sees the young man coming out, carrying the girl who had been taken. The protagonist explains that this is the end for the children captured by the monsters. Elsie realizes the victims were turned into those meatballs and thinks she almost met the same fate. At that, Yam asks if the saint can bring the holy knights faster, and she warns she can only issue a mobilization order to nearby temples while they wait. The protagonist tells the saint to act immediately. His friends are scared by Yam's change in behavior, and the saint remembers she hasn't seen him like this since the day he faced her bodyguard. The young man declares he will ease the pain of the other children, while the request for help is sent. Sometime later, Yam thinks that seeing Lin like that unlocked memories of his future, and also allowed him to use the golden lion sword. He announces the group will no longer take shelter there, as the attack on the demon's nest means the orphanage won't be left in peace, leaving them no choice but to run far away with the younger ones. Delphiram asks where he plans to take the children. The saint warns the temple can provide temporary shelter, but suggests using a nearby village since they can't transport everyone at once, asking Yurin to prepare for departure. Yam tells the saint to go ahead to handle the preparations while he takes charge of the children. Later, the saint explains what happened to the orphanage owner, Guilford. The man understands the situation, and upon discovering that the girl left Leto's warning to Yam, he claims it's too late for everything. A short time later, the protagonist arrives at the orphanage and starts looking for Leto, eventually finding him collapsed and wounded. Leto reveals he found the accounting ledger and asks Yam to look at it, making the young man realize that several administrative errors were covered up by an individual named Mitram. His friend warns that the orphanage isn't normal and points to Director Guilford as the one responsible. At the same time, the saint questions Guilford's words. The director claims it is too late to save Leto or run away, revealing himself as the magic beast disguised behind the mess. Outside, the group faces the beasts while Urine directs the children to be taken inside. Elsie struggles to lead everyone and ends up getting attacked in the process. Delphiram appears in time to help her and warns her not to delay the evacuation. The other girls also offer to help, so Urine decides that he and Delphiram will handle the rear guard. Back with the saint, she understands Guilford was the figure behind the story the whole time. The old man explains he also grew up in an orphanage, learned swordsmanship from the director, and realized he was just another kid fighting for food. That was when he received a visit, took the place of the former administrator, and joined the dark cult, accepting the deal to hand over one child a month in exchange for gold. He claims this sacrifice saves many others, and that nobles would never understand the reality orphans live in. The director decides to give the saint a chance to live, drawing a pentagram on the floor and asking for a drop of blood in the circle in exchange for her promise never to tell what she found out. She realizes she was facing a very well-disguised cultist, refuses any deal, and wonders if Yam knew about this and didn't want to tell her. Not accepting her answer, Guilford throws her into the circle, claiming it's for her own good. Before he can do anything, an axe is thrown, and the old man dodges, but he is quickly struck in the arm by a second weapon. Yam approaches and orders Guilford to step away. The saint gets up, thanks him for the help, and is told to go help Leto, leaving the old man's situation to the protagonist. She warns it's dangerous to face the enemy alone, but the young man insists Leto doesn't have much time. Guilford tries to stop her escape, but Yam tells his opponent not to turn his back, allowing the girl to leave as she promises to help their friend, and cheers for the protagonist. The old man claims again that he did his best to save the children, but Yam tells him he should be ashamed, and that their time for talking is over. Guilford notices the boy is stronger since they last practiced, but says that won't be enough to defeat him. The director attacks with intensity, but the protagonist fights back, shattering the surroundings during the clash. When Guilford calls him weak, Yam counters by pointing out how slow his enemy is. The protagonist manages to lock the old man's sword with his axe. Then, Yam wields the Holy Lion's sword and slashes his enemy with precision, declaring the battle is over. Refusing to back down, Guilford takes his demon form and guarantees he won't be defeated so easily. Meanwhile, the saint reaches Leto and treats his wounds. She tells him not to worry, since she promised her friend she'd help. Back to Yam, Guilford declares that those who sacrifice something precious receive power from the evil god Omeros in exchange. He reveals that on the night he lost his comrades, he found a vampire and made a contract, trading his friends for this power. Guilford claims he's been much more powerful since then, and warns Yam is about to feel a bit of that strength. When attacked, Yam dodges just in time but gets hurt. He realizes those claws are powerful, and he can't get hit again. Next, Guilford reminds the protagonist he taught him to keep his eyes on the fight until the end, advising him not to look away for even a second. In response, Yam backs off and throws his axe at his enemy. He hits his target but notices Guilford didn't even try to dodge. The protagonist concludes it won't be easy to defeat someone with such high defense, and his regeneration speed is insanely fast. Then, Guilford lands a kick on Yam, sending him crashing through the wall to the outside of the orphanage. However, the enemy throws the sword to the boy and demands he get up to keep fighting, since it's too early to end. Yam recovers and warns he won't run away. In his thoughts, he concludes the demonic aura is a problem, because Guilford hides his movement with illusions and moves way too fast. Guilford claims that, unlike the protagonist, he can read every opponent's move, and lands another blow on Yam. The old man comments the boy should have trusted his 5 senses instead of being fooled by illusions, saying that, unfortunately, he won't get another chance. However, Yam stands up and says this isn't the end. Guilford asks how the boy can still stand. It turns out Yam used one of his recovery potions, claiming the enemy only delayed his defeat, and tells him not to hold back his strength. The enemy attacks again, but the protagonist holds up Lin's hair tie, hoping to distract him. The old man recognizes the item and hesitates, making the tactic work. Yam dodges the attack and strikes Guilford from behind. Despite this, the boy gets tired as the potion's effect begins to fade. Guilford comments he taught the boy well, and that he learned the technique perfectly. Yam replies he only managed to do it because his opponent hesitated for a moment. The old man claims his weakness caused his downfall, but warns that after his death, the flesh tree will lose control, and no one will be able to stop it. The protagonist guarantees he won't give up or let a demon win. After that, Guilford finally dies, and Yam worries about his friends. Nearby, after Guilford's defeat, the demon monkeys start to run away. Celine asks what happened for them to run off all of a sudden. The saint explains the power controlling them disappeared, which means Yam defeated the demon. Elsie asks how a student managed to defeat a demon alone, but Delphirum says it doesn't matter because they won. Just then, the protagonist approaches and says the situation isn't over yet. Celine asks what he means. Yam warns the worst is coming and points to the forest where the flesh tree is bearing fruit, concluding that as long as that thing isn't destroyed, they can't claim victory. Elsie asks how they're going to destroy those things, but Delphirum says they don't need to fight and there's still time to retreat. Yam replies they won't leave without the children and warns the nest could grow and spread quickly. The saint warns the boy isn't in any condition to keep going after such a dangerous fight and reminds him everyone is exhausted, suggesting they retreat to recover. The protagonist insists the only option to save everyone is to destroy the monster because running away would bring an even more tragic future, stating he's willing to keep going even if he's alone. The saint comments that Yam keeps changing his behavior, going from cold to reckless, and asks what he's really planning. The young man stresses that he understands the circumstances, but he won't abandon the children. Realizing she can't convince him, the saint asks the group to gather near her and casts a buffing spell on the team. The girls immediately notice they are being healed and their energy is rising. The protagonist notices the saint's action, but she reminds him that they both agreed to keep this a secret. Next, she hands Yam a pill, asking him to come back alive to return it, and warns that she'll leave with urine to bring the cavalry. The young man concludes that, in the end, the saint doesn't want to lose him. After that, Leto asks his friend to lead the fight away from the orphanage, as he'll stay behind to evacuate the children. Celine also approaches, saying she is bothered by something. Yam warns her she doesn't have to participate if she's scared, but points out the fight will be a matter of life or death, requiring full dedication from everyone. After Celine declares she is ready, the group advances to the tree and Yam orders the attack. Meanwhile, Leto tries to evacuate the children, but they are hesitant to leave and ask for the director, making him lie that the man is fighting outside to get everyone to cooperate. At the battlefield, the whole team fights with full dedication, and Elsie unleashes a strike that hits several flesh balls, though it doesn't eliminate them all. Yam continues the fight, and soon notices Celine is in trouble dealing with the countless enemies. Elsie tries to help with magic, but freezes up when she sees so many targets approaching at once. Sensing this, the protagonist throws his axe and goes to the girls, saying he understands their fear, but asks them to stay strong until the end. Yam notices the tree keeps spitting out flesh balls, and realizes there are more enemies than the number of missing children. Next, he instructs Celine and Elsie to cover each other. He charges forward and tells Delphirum not to attack the enemy directly, an instruction she follows even without understanding. The protagonist helps with his axe, but realizes the opponent keeps moving even while on fire and won't go down easily. In the middle of this, the enemy unleashes a toxic rain, claiming it won't be defeated. Delphirum realizes the tree can talk, but she and the protagonist keep attacking. Soon after, Delphirum notes that the creature seems to have run out of seeds to spit. She gets attacked, but a magic strike from Elsie, who stayed in the back line providing support, protects her. The protagonist tells Delphirum to back off a bit and charges forward. Yam's axe ends up getting deflected. The enemy declares it won't lose, knocks the protagonist away, and tries to escape. Yam tries to go after the opponent, but gets grabbed by the leg. From afar, Delphirum manages to help him and warns him not to lower his guard. Next, the protagonist uses absolute rupture, noticing that not even his sword can pierce the flesh tree. He gets attacked again, and concludes the monster isn't considered legendary for nothing. The monster says it needs to create seeds and goes after the children. Yam warns his friends to protect the little ones and tries to hold back the creature's advance. The others notice the smaller monsters are ignoring the group and going after the new target. To stop them, Elsie unleashes a magic attack while Yurdina attacks hand to hand. Leto warns they are almost there and asks them to hold on a little longer. Yurdina tells Leto to keep evacuating, goes to Yam, and reports that the children managed to escape. Hearing this, the protagonist tells Syria to run with the others. He decides to stay behind to defeat the enemy once and for all, as he just came up with a foolproof plan. Yam realizes he's already tired, the saint's blessing effects have worn off, and physical attacks aren't working. He concludes his only option is to use the fire attack with Leto's scroll. The enemy tries to attack him, but Yam uses his last remaining strength to dodge and look for the perfect spot to place the item. During the process, he ends up getting hit, feels intense pain, and can barely keep going. The opponent claims no one can beat him, but Yam warns he has a trick up his sleeve and that the monster is about to find out what a dust explosion is. The young man decides that if he has to burn down with the creature, so be it, activating the scroll and causing a massive detonation. Leto understands the meaning of the explosion and gets worried, while everyone starts to think Yam blew himself up. Celine goes after her friend and finds him lying on the ground. Yam claims he finally defeated the enemy, but the girl tells him to save his strength because she's going to get help. In the middle of this, the protagonist remembers when he tied Lin's hair for the first time and how she thanked him for the hairstyle. Sometime later, Yam wakes up and asks where he is. Leto informs him they're in a temple and that the saint treated his wounds. The protagonist mentions he doesn't remember anything after the explosion and asks how he survived. Leto replies that he'd also like to know, pointing out that his friend had a close call and should thank the saint once again. Next, Leto explains that the Guilford orphanage was investigated, leaving the Holy Kingdom on alert with the demonic appearance, and that the children were transferred safely. He warns that Yam became a celebrity for leading the team and eliminating the demon, attracting the interest of the Imperial Knights. The boy doesn't like drawing so much attention, but he understands it makes sense according to his memories of the future about his connections to the Imperial family. Leto reports that the whole group will receive a good reward, but warns that the Knights demanded silence about the monster to avoid widespread panic. The mastermind behind the incident hasn't been discovered yet, so Yam points out that Mitram is responsible. Leto agrees, mentioning the name was in the account books and probably belongs to a priest of the dark cult, indicating they got themselves into deep trouble. Yam says he's satisfied with the result, hoping not to get involved in this kind of situation anymore. Far away, a girl reads the news about the Viscount's son who defeated a demon and asks Imperial Knight Island for her opinion. The warrior considers the story exaggerated due to the people's need for a new hero. The girl claims she'll find out the truth on her own, revealing herself to be Shen, the 5th princess of the empire, and plans to meet Yam in person soon. Yam has another dream about his future, where he's holding hands with a girl in a gruesome scene. She warns that his eyes attracted a terrible creature. Yam replies that he doesn't know how much longer they'll hold out if that thing was released. The young woman confirms it's impossible to resist any longer, demanding he make a decision, and right after that, the protagonist wakes up realizing he dreamed of something different. Then, he finds another letter near his desk, feeling a massive headache as he reads it and realizes the situation has become even more drastic. He thinks it won't be just any problem and has no idea how he'll solve the issue. In the middle of this, Yam receives a note under the door that bursts into flames when opened. The flames form words declaring that the one who raised a hand against the Imperial family will suffer the consequences. Sometime later, walking through the campus, Yam recalls that on the day of his discharge he met Celine, Syria, and Elsie, drinking alone after that until he passed out in bed. He concludes that his future self took control after that moment, and considers that messing with the Imperial family went too far, wondering what he did this time. At that moment, the student teen approaches him, asking how Yam has the nerve to show up there. Recognizing his classmate, Yam deals with his friends and takes Teen away, warning that he'll ask polite questions that require answers without hesitation. The boy asks how he dares talk about politeness, so Yam presses him, asking what happened in the last few days. A flashback reveals that the future Yam was approached by Princess Shen. Acting formally, he questioned the reason for the conversation. Shen was direct, asking if Yam was willing to join her in exchange for having any wish granted and a recommendation for the Imperial knighthood. The princess explained she could make him the legitimate successor, securing the Perkis territory and the position of family head as long as he knelt and swore loyalty. In response, Yam stated he had a better idea and poured water on the princess, claiming she needed to cool her head. The bodyguard attacked him immediately, but Yam defended himself and slammed Island down with extreme ease, mocking her skills. Shen sees the royal knight get defeated quickly. Yam pointed out that the princess's protection was terrible, since she would have died if that were poison. Finally, he highlighted that only one of them confronted him, while the others didn't even draw their swords, asking if they were really royal guards or just a bunch of useless bums. Sometime later, Yam defeated all the guards, and told the princess she was hanging out with a bunch of useless people needing new protectors. Shen offered a last chance at redemption, stating she'd pretend nothing happened if he knelt. However, the boy refused the proposal. Then, the princess declared that no one treated the Imperial family like that and got away with it, promising to use every method at her disposal to destroy Yam and his family. Yam retorted that Shen's eyes were always useless, and claimed he didn't fear threats because in the future none of that would matter. The princess promised that from that moment on, everything he loved would be destroyed in 3 months at most. Considering the deadline too long, Yam grabbed the axe thrown at the bodyguard and told Shen to finish her revenge project in a single month. The princess warned that he'd regret it, but the boy claimed that either way, he wouldn't be the one dealing with the consequences. Back to the present, the protagonist thinks that this time his future self went too far. After telling the story, Teen says Yam is completely doomed, but the protagonist knocks the boy out and tries to think of a way to reverse the situation. Meanwhile, he is approached by Leto, who comments that throwing water on the princess's head became a trend after what Yam did. During a later conversation, Leto advises his friend not to fall for other people's bait. Yam wants to do something about it, while Leto notes that the future version always acts more aggressively with each appearance. Knowing his friend isn't to blame and that the future self wouldn't do something without a reason, Leto concludes that the recent event must be a preparation for something bigger. The protagonist agrees that this makes sense, as he wouldn't have entered the festival if he hadn't gotten involved with Saria Yurdina. Leto claims his friend needs to find out the reason behind these actions by following the tracks left by the future Yam. He reveals he talked to Yuren and found out the future version went to speak with the Saintess. However, before Yam's departure, Leto's sister sent a letter. Through the letter, Leto knows the princess has already started to act, though he doesn't know what's coming. Sometime later, the protagonist goes to speak with the Saintess and finds her praying for him. She asks how he got in without being announced, and Yam replies that Yuren simply let him pass. Questioned about the reason for the visit, the boy explains he's there to find out what happened the last time he was at the temple. The Saintess then scolds him for fighting with royalty, reminding him he said he wanted to stay out of trouble, but apparently changed his mind. Yam claims someone possessed his body, but the Saintess refuses to hear excuses, stating he almost died at the orphanage and shouldn't get into more trouble. She points out that magic crystals aren't infinite, and she can't keep bringing him back forever. Yam realizes the woman exhausted her resources on him, and argues that sometimes he needs to follow the path he believes is right to obey destiny. After promising to be careful, he asks what happened last time. The Saintess says she doesn't believe his memory loss, but reports that nothing much happened on that occasion. She says Yam only asked for an item capable of purifying curses and erasing light-dark magic. After receiving a flask of holy water, he left. After listening to the Saintess, Yam asks how to use holy water. She questions why he asked for an item he doesn't know how to use, but explains it serves to treat minor wounds and mainly purify curses and dark magic. Although a temple is more effective, the item is useful in field emergencies. The protagonist deduces that his future self threw holy water on the princess, wondering to himself why he hid this from Shen, and concluding that the situation is getting worse. The Saintess mentions that Yam has the dragon blood runes, a magic granted by the emperor that makes him virtually untouchable. Since this identity is only proven by showing the runes, she guesses he didn't show them to the princess. Annoyed, the Saintess says he had no fear when blowing up a building with a monster inside and shouldn't chicken out before a spoiled girl. Yam claims the situation is more complicated, but she insists everything would be solved if he revealed his status. Yam confesses he doesn't know how to do that properly, leaving the Saintess furious because he didn't hesitate to use the runes against her. He apologizes and says it wasn't him that time. Then he says sorry and decides to leave before the mood gets worse. The Saintess complains that he only shows up when he needs something and never when she wants to see him, but quickly realizes she said too much and tells the boy to get out. After being kicked out, the protagonist organizes the information he found and tries to figure out why his future self didn't reveal his identity to Shen. Just then, he spots Emma in trouble. The girl asks an arrogant guy to let her go because she wants to leave, but he slaps her, not caring about the consequences. As she falls, Emma notices Yam. The attacker asks where she's looking and gets his answer when Yam throws his axe at him, making sure he'll never hit anyone again. The noble asks if Yam has any idea what he just did, and warns him that attacking someone of his status over a commoner won't go unpunished. The protagonist glares at him and replies he's crazy enough to face a princess, so a mere noble means nothing. He says he doesn't care about the consequences, and decides to use the guy as an example of what happens to anyone who dares touch his friends. Later, Delphirem arrives at the scene at Yam's request and notes he went too hard. The protagonist asks her to take care of those boys and protect Emma at all costs, a task Delphirem considers a piece of cake. She then warns him that the princess is furious and issued a decree for the 5 great noble families to surround his family's territory. Yam figures that's why he got his sister's letter and asks what the Yudina family will do. Delphirem explains they're delaying the interference behind the scenes, but it's only a temporary fix. Yam says that's enough for him to try and solve things while she buys time. Asked about his plan, he reveals he'll start with the university newspaper, since their articles are fueling the situation. Delphirem agrees and shares confidential info that the journalism club is a bunch of traitors. Understanding why the club is so aggressive, Yam decides to act fast. He reassures Emma, telling her not to feel guilty and to keep working on her miracle potions. Next, the protagonist goes to the journalism club and annoys some members by entering without permission. He declares that the entire building dedicated to a single club is just a cover for the academy branch of the Empire's intelligence division. He gets attacked right away but manages to defend himself. Yam says he already knows everything, tells them to drop the fake act, and demands to speak with the club president since he didn't come to deal with small fry. One of the boys who tries to confront the protagonist ends up getting wrecked in front of the others. The group is warned that Yam defeated 4 royal guards by himself, so so they shouldn't let their guard down. Meanwhile, the protagonist thinks that the moment Emma got slapped, he remembered a woman being swallowed by flames in a ritual. Because of that memory, his anger didn't fade, and he lost control, which is happening again right now. As he gets attacked, he doesn't hold back against his opponents and warns them they're wasting time trying to stop him. Yam says he won't go easy just because they're from the intelligence division, charging into the fight as if he's battling a dragon. He grabs one of the boys who asks how he dares do that knowing their affiliation. Just then, another opponent tries a sneak attack, but the protagonist uses the captured boy to slam into the attacker, claiming they started this fight. The boy with glasses comments that it's stupid to turn your back on an enemy. Yam replies that it's typical of Empire intelligence to attack, even when they have no chance of winning, and declares he'll do the nation a favor by getting rid of them. After beating everyone in the main hall, the protagonist starts to feel strange and figures out that the dagger that cut him was poisoned, leaving him with very little time to act. He heads to the boss's office and finds Neris, the prom queen. The girl welcomes the Prince of the Axe and sarcastically asks if he's feeling well. The protagonist notes she's acting way too familiar for someone he just met, warning her never to try and touch him or his people again. Hearing the threat, the girl just laughs, and Yam notices her extreme confidence for someone in a dangerous position. Right after, several daggers are thrown at him. He tries to dodge, but doesn't get away unscathed, realizing the poison has dulled his senses. Neris walks up and comments on her surprise to see Yam afraid of knives, and then the protagonist hurls a table at her. The girl blocks it easily and warns him that the poison will spread faster the more he moves. Realizing how fast Neris is, Yam decides to go all out. He manages to hit her, but realizes he'll soon be unable to fight. Neris comments that she hasn't fought seriously in a while and decides to end the battle. The protagonist notices she's using a spatial expansion bag and asks why she uses such an expensive item, to which the girl replies that belonging to the Imperial family has its privileges. A knife almost hits Yam, who dodges, but feels his movements slowing down while Neris speeds up. Shortly after, she pins him down, impressed by his high endurance. Neris reveals she likes using poison against nobles, since she's a commoner recruited by the intelligence division, and demands to know how he found out the truth about the journalism club. The protagonist passes out and has another vision of the future, where he visits the Emperor for a private conversation. The Emperor asks Yam about the battle situation. The warrior reports that there were originally 6 great warriors of the Empire, but they were all wiped out and enemy forces surrounded the Great Wall, though he refuses to stop fighting as long as he lives. The Emperor then asks if human history is destined to end like this, and claims Yam is humanity's last master, as well as his loyal subject. Because of this, he decides to grant Yam the sacred dragon blood runes. Yam warns him that these can only be passed down to the heir of the Empire, but the Emperor argues that traditions mean nothing at the end of the world and orders the warrior to save the world. After that, the protagonist wakes up from his dream. Neris, who was trying to interrogate him for information, realizes she was talking to herself, as the knife pinning Yam down has melted and he's already standing, ready to fight again. Yam asks if he should call her Neris or Findelston. The girl asks how he knows the name she abandoned so long ago. The protagonist says she has already talked too much and tells her to be quiet, then uses his dragon mark and reveals himself as the Emperor's representative. An explosion occurs and the girl gets thrown far away. The protagonist stands up and Neris asks where he came from. Yam replies that he has no obligation to explain himself, warns her that he won't repeat his words, and tells her to pay attention to what she's about to hear, demanding that she doesn't question him. Sometime later, Yam reads a newspaper article and asks if that's the retraction. Neris explains that the goal was to scare his enemies first, and then try to clean up his image. He says he didn't really like it, but tells his subordinate to keep going with that approach. Yam thinks to himself that it's already been 4 days since he made Neris his ally and ordered her to use the journalism club to his advantage, besides asking her to investigate the keywords from a letter mentioning a procession, a cave, and a dragon's eye. Neris warns him that she didn't have time to find anything concrete, as cave and dragon's eye are common terms, but reports that the word procession is related to the welcoming festival that's about to start. The protagonist starts considering an attack during the event, which consists of a march at the end of each academy semester, with students and teachers participating. Yam thinks they can't ignore this and asks about the cave. Neris says she only found holes around the city that are too small for a person to enter, apologizes for not finding anything else, and asks for a bit more time. The protagonist agrees to give her more time, but demands that she searches properly and reports any suspicious hole, whether big, medium, or small. Next, Yam asks what she found out about the dragon's eye. Before answering, Neris senses someone approaching and warns him that it seems to be the princess and her bodyguard. Shen arrives and asks what Yam is doing in the middle of a forest. The princess thinks she's been mocked by her siblings for not knowing how to choose good company due to a lack of charisma, and wonders how someone from the elite like Eileen lost to a mere student. Shen says she knows Yam made an alliance with the intelligence team and asks if he has connections to anyone in the royal family. Eileen suggests that the protagonist probably took control of the journalism club by force. The princess gets scared of the possibility, thinking there's no way the entire intelligence team fell to just one man. However, Shen hears a suspicious noise and sees a silhouette ahead apologizing. She then realizes Neris is being pinned down and that Yam is punishing her for not obeying his orders properly. A flashback reveals that before the princess arrived, Neris suggested they leave. The protagonist thinks that since he has dragon blood, Neris must report to him. However, showing the rune to the princess would be bad, as it was his future self who got the mark, and the emperor would deny giving it to him in the present. Because of this, he decides to use another strategy and pretends to attack Neris in front of the princess, hoping she buys the act. Neris plays along and acts convincingly, using her experience from the intelligence division. The protagonist then orders her to leave the area immediately and obey his orders without question from now on. Next, Yam glares at Princess Shen and asks why she followed him into the forest. Shen claims that his confidence and the way he talks to Neris show he is backed by a member of the royal family. The protagonist fires back, saying her assumption makes no sense and that he was just asking the girl for a favor. Shen insists that he acts like he owns the academy, even though he's a low-ranking noble, and asks if he sold his own sister in exchange for status in the empire. Instantly, Yam closes in on the princess so fast that her bodyguard can't react in time, and he fakes an attack against her. Yam warns that Shen is way too confident and didn't even consider the possibility of getting eliminated in this harsh forest, also pointing out the pathetic state of her bodyguard. He promises he won't use his axe against the princess unless she forces his hand. Later, the protagonist goes to the Saintess and mentions he'll visit his hometown after the festival. He then asks if she found any clues about the case, or if she invited him out on a date. The Saintess warns him that a disciplinary committee will be formed because of the young nobles he beat up. Yam mentions he put Delphiram in charge of handling that, but the Saintess reveals the princess visited the injured students in the hospital and ordered them to tell the truth to the committee, which could get him expelled. She asks him to calm down and avoid more trouble, since she's been treating too many students with severe injuries lately. Yam claims he's not to blame, which makes the Saintess ask who's really responsible for attacking the students. Meanwhile, on campus, Saria Yurdina attacks a student, declaring she won't let anyone insult Yam in front of her. She warns that anyone trying to hurt him will have to deal with her first, also claiming she'll use self-defense as an excuse if anyone reports her. Right after, Yurdina runs into Celine, who points out how similar they are since they're both completely alone with no friends around. The protagonist shows up next and says he's sorry for making things hard for his friends lately. The girls say they're fine, though they know deep down that's not true. And Celine says Yam always has his reasons for what he does. The protagonist thanks them for their trust, promises everything will end soon, and explains he needs information. With that, he goes to find Delphiram, who is currently bickering with Elsie. Yam asks them not to fight and asks what Delphiram found out. She reveals she discovered a secret passage built with magic hundreds of years ago, which serves as an escape route for the royal family between the academy and the city outskirts. Yam says this is exactly what he was looking for, and Elsie quickly shares info about the magic beast from the Hunt Festival, whose case was closed with the cause of death listed as unknown. Thinking it over, the protagonist remembers the letter about a coordinated magic beast attack and deduces that everything is connected.